Are we on? Yep. And are we live streaming? Obviously not streaming.
Responsible for that,
Not streaming, I'm talking about the Zooming. Are we Zooming? Yes.
Yes,
I know
we
we
are
are.
on Zoom.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the Town of Camden Select Board meeting for September 20th, 2022. As usual, we have a live meeting. We also are streaming on YouTube, and we have a webinar that is operating. The link for the webinar can be found in the Camden Select Board website under the Select Board. Today's meeting, 9/20/22. On the agenda, you'll find the link. As I've stated before, as a Zoom attendee, if you have a question or like to make a comment, please raise your hand. That's the most effective way to be recognized and to contribute to the meeting, just as people do here when they're live in the meeting. We do not monitor chat. We don't have the bandwidth to do that. It's just too disruptive. And please understand that it's treating the people here and the people in the webinar with the same criterion. With that, I will open the agenda with anybody who has a public comment on a non-agenda item. Is there anybody here that has a non-agenda item comment? Please. And just while you're walking up, please identify yourself, residency, of course. You know the drill. Limit to 3 minutes, and don't expect any response from the select board or the town manager. Just please make your comments.
Would you turn on the microphone?
Oh, sorry, Bob.
Hit the button, yeah.
Bob, I'm sorry, but try to stay as close to that mic as you can. I know the podium's a little low. You don't have to get on your knees.
What's going on there?
Bob Gassett, I live on. What?
We should just fix that. It's not usually like that.
It was set up for me, not for you.
It's not a good start.
Oh.
Well, no, we know you're going to finish strong, though.
Okay. How's that? Yeah.
Still readjusting after SIF.
Yeah.
There you go, Robert. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Did we get the Bob Gassett part?
Yes, I did.
Okay. 20 Thomas Street. This is about the tannery. I would like to say thanks for the remediation, which is looking so good down there. So the tannery, in 2017, the Tannery Park Committee, the work group, presented ideas for a community park that was embraced but not made official by the select board at that time. The plans for a community park galvanized a community group, the Friends of Tannery Park, that has since become an official 501c3 nonprofit corporation. This nonprofit is now prepared to fundraise for the community park at the tannery lot. After the town vote against the Mullins proposal, can our nonprofit now start fundraising for this park? Strong finish? That's it. So that's my question.
I'm sorry, we're not answering any questions.
But that's,
Go ahead. Okay, but state it, please.
yeah. We'd like to start fundraising for the park.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay.
But
Thank
I
you.
think we're going to need to discuss that more at a future
Well,
time,
yeah,
right?
we're not approving anything or discussing anything. You made a statement, and that's all there is to it. You're right. My statement wasn't go ahead and raise money. Thank you for the comment. That's it.
Okay. Thanks.
Will respond though at some point, correct?
Send me an email. Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Thanks for coming. Any other comments from the public? All right, with that, we'll move on to item 2, which is the approval of board minutes from August 23rd, 2022, and September 6th, 2022, and September 7th, 2022. We'll take one at a time. Any comments or a motion for August 23rd, 2022? Do you have one? Any comments? Motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion made and second. Any comments? All those in favor? 5-0. Thank you. For the September 6, 2022 minutes, same question.
Hey, Tom, Can we just limit to have
Yeah,
one conversation at a time, please? It's easier for people who are listening.
Thank
to
you
us
very
and also
much.
for
Thank
me.
you.
Thank you.
Send me an email.
Okay, give me your address.
A motion to approve the September 6 minutes?
Second.
Made and seconded. Any discussion? No. All in favor? You're fast. 5-0, thank you. September 9th, 2022, same question, comments? No? Motion?
Motion to approve?
And second.
Motion made and seconded. All those approve? 5-0, thank you.
Are you Stephanie Griffin?
Stephanie Griffin, French.
French. I just see it here. Stephanie Griffin made a motion to approve normally I'm used to seeing I didn't know if we're supposed to be calling you Stephanie Griffin instead of.
No, I'm Stephanie French.
Right.
Okay, well, I did not notice that, sorry.
Which,
Oh, and I'm Sophie Roman now.
so the corrections, are we talking about September 9th, 2022?
Yes.
Okay, so there's two corrections. One,
Yes.
Stephanie Griffin should be Stephanie French, and it should be Sophie Romana.
With an A, not Romano.
Where are you seeing, oh,
Yeah, misspelled.
oh, yep, I see that.
Let's revise the motion and restate.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes of the September 9, 2022 meeting with the corrected names for Stephanie French and Sophie Romana.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any other further comments? Not hearing any, seeing any. All those in favor? 5-0. Thank you for those good corrections. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing for the renewal of a liquor license for Sea Dog Brew Pub at 1 Main Street. Before I go into any discussion, is there anybody here that wants to speak to it or on Zoom that wants to speak to it? I'm not seeing any hands in either place, so I'm delaying, but still not seeing any. So we will, the reason I ask is because the purpose of a public hearing is for the select board to receive public input on the matter at hand. And there's a procedure we go through for that. And after everybody's spoken, I close the public sector and revert to the select board deliberation, which is what I will do now since there is no public comments that anybody's raised their hand. So with that, do I have any questions, comments, or motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve?
Second.
Motion made and approved for the renewal liquor license for Sea Dog Brew Pub at 1 Main Street. Comments, all those in favor?
You said
5-0.
motion made and approved instead of motion made and seconded, but
Oh, okay, well, we'll go.
I was gonna let that go,
I'll restate the motion to restate the
Stephanie was going to
approval.
let that fly, so.
I know. And then I was like, blah, blah, blah. I just started coming out of my mouth and I
Is
couldn't
that
stop.
Griffin or French? The item 4, let's forget about the consent.
Sorry, I should have just let it go. All right.
One item, it doesn't need to be on a consent agenda. I'm going to ask for a motion for the approval of the 2 taxi cab drivers for craft deliveries service. And their information is in our packet. Is there any questions, or do I have a motion to approve?
So
Motion.
moved.
Yeah.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? 5-0. Thank you very much. To our action items, the first.
Can I just underscore the increased competition in taxi services in our town in the past 3 weeks?
I love
think
it.
I love it. Thank you so
love
much
it.
for people for stepping up because it's a real need for people who
I
don't have wheels. So
couldn't agree
competition
more.
is great. Thank you.
Couldn't agree more. With that, we'll move on to item 4, which is we have 6 action items to deal with tonight. The first of which is the approval of the, I call it next year's farmers market license agreement for the tannery property. Again, the agreement is substantively in the same form as it was last year, as I read it. Audra, is that correct?
Yes.
So, are there any discussion from the select board, comments, or motion? Allison, go
I was
ahead.
just a little confused by that. It says the license agreement shall terminate on October 29th, 2022. And so I was like, so that gave me the impression that we were like redoing their license for the end of this year.
My guess is,
Typo.
yeah, it's just a typo and we should have put 2023.
That's a good catch.
Yes.
Okay.
So that would mean on the
this-
next sentence, it
this-
would be,
Let me take a look at that, because this is important, because this is, as I'm
Yeah.
understanding, this was for
Yeah.
approval the license that will take them through all of next summer and early fall.
So there's,
Is that correct, Audra?
yes, so it should be 2023. Yeah, but it also said that it starts on September 24, 2022.
Right.
Right, so it was,
Those from
are they
September-
trying
I
to
see.
extend it for this year, or, because,
Oh, sorry, it's for the remainder of the season, not the entire year, so.
Audra, wasn't their license this year because of, just suspended or stopped
Yeah,
this year?
because of the remediation.
Because of remediation, so they terminated the license this year
so this is
previously. So this is taking effect now
Restart.
through next October 29th.
No, it would just be.
It lets them
Just for
back
the
on
end
the
of the
site
season.
for just the remainder of this season. Yes.
Because the farmer's market doesn't go all through the winter.
It doesn't, but usually, I thought the contract went before.
I don't remember that we actually terminated it before. I thought they just, they
I
were,
didn't either, but I found out today that we did.
Yeah, you revoked it so we could get them to move off the site while we were doing the remediation, and this reinstates it.
I don't remember
It
revoking
didn't come
it.
to the board. I think it was done, because we had to. What?
What's that?
I said the farmer's market actually didn't move either.
They did. For a couple,
They did.
Revoke it, we just moved them.
I think just for the record, I don't think it was revoked in a meeting, but it was revoked, and this is just a continuation of the same license for this month and that month.
Yeah, they did move over to the middle school, just once, but they did.
Yeah, just so, for clarification though, Audra, for next year, we would in the spring address this agreement again for next year? Is that correct?
Typically the winter, yes, winter.
But it'd be another select board approval for
Yes.
a future contract. I
Yes,
think
we
it's
only,
important-
we only do it for a year at a
That's
time.
important to note because we've already, in terms of, I was going to comment on the fees and like, that's something we would bring up next year, not now.
okay, so now I'm understanding why there was some confusion about this, because I had a couple of people write me kind of alleging that they were like, I heard the town isn't going to renew the farmer's market license, and I was a little dismissive of that and said, definitely not, we're just doing some remediation, and so now I understand where that came from.
They're not going to have to pay $50 to just extend for another month, correct?
Correct.
So that's, all right, good.
Yeah, it's,
paid for it.
that's why I was saying it, Tom, because to a discussion about anything, if we wanted to change or eliminate whatever, the fee, they've already paid it. I think they've already
Okay.
paid it for the year, so this is
That was a
just.
big Mark Haskell thing,
It was.
that Mark was like,
Yeah,
just have them pay something.
There's a whole different discussion that
I
has to
know,
occur
but-
next time on that one, but not now. So with that, do I have any other questions, or, go ahead.
Kind of, because I think using words like revoked is, I mean, why was it necessary to revoke their license at this? I mean, I spent a fair amount of time trying to understand where and I was like, that's all just a rumor. And I realized now that I was not speaking
I see.
correctly. And
Could have been suspended.
I mean, but that kind of language is
I don't know.
meaningful to people. And I'm trying to understand I think they were willing to move, right, just for this.
Yes.
Didn't have a choice because of remediation.
Right,
So-
but
So whether the
How do we
contract, was- I mean,
handle
I don't know. My understanding, it was revoked, and then we're reinvigorating the remainder of the term of that same agreement.
It's a legal term, really, revocable license.
I know, but we didn't, we're the only ones capable of revoking it. And so to use that term,
You mean
they
as
were
in the
told,
select
that.
board?
So exactly, yes.
We didn't revoke it then. If the select board didn't, did we ask them to move, or did we require that they move?
We required them to move.
And that was,
We actually
It
sent them a
makes
note.
sense that they needed to move, I
I
understand
guess
that,
the
but,
matter at hand is, did we actually send them a notice that said their license was revoked? Do you know?
yeah, I guess that's what I'm
I
asking.
do not know the answer
Because
to
if we
that.
didn't,
I
we
know
don't
that
need,
Jeremy spoke to them when he found out the date they were coming, because he called me about any possible other locations.
We did send them a letter revoking their license.
okay, all right, all right.
Okay.
So, right, wrong, or indifferent, maybe we shouldn't have, but this is just bringing it back on the table to make sure that current license is still active. That's really what we're doing
So,
here.
and did we feel were we having trouble?
It was very necessary for the Wednesday night market to revoke the license.
Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah, Wednesday evening, sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, absolutely understand that it was
Sure.
essential that they move.
They
And
were
if,
absolutely refusing to move.
I guess, if things reach that level of like dissent or confusion, it would be helpful to have that come back to us in some way. Because I'm just giving false information to people. And I don't like that. Like, that would have provided a lot of context that I had no idea that it was difficult to get them to move.
Well, I don't want to represent that it was. There's a real difference between the Saturday and Wednesday market, even though they're under the same governance structure. We deal with different people, and the Saturday people are the ones who are formally the people that have, anyway.
I brought Jeremy on
Yeah.
Oh, great.
instead of trying to second guess.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize Jeremy was on here.
I didn't either until Jeremy, you've heard, thanks for raising your hand. I didn't know you were there either, but go ahead. You heard.
I've heard the whole thing.
Yep.
So to clarify, we did, working with Bill Kelly, the town manager has the ability to revoke the license for the environmental reasons. And the Camden Farmers Market was okay with that. So we technically did revoke that license. We did the work. We worked with the Farmers Market to get them over to the middle school. The Wednesday Farmers Market ended up over at the corner of McGuntacook, and wasn't great over by the McGuntacook Market. And then the environmental work was done and completed. This allows them to get back onto the site using the paved areas that they've been using this, the majority of the summer. That's what this does. This just extends, this re-ups the agreement that you approved last spring or, February or whatever it was.
Okay.
That's what this does. So they technically did get their license agreement revoked. And in order for them to get back on the site, we have to have another agreement, and that's what this agreement is.
Right. So bottom line was, basically, on advice from Bill Cully, because this was an environmental issue, the authority didn't rest with the board, it rested with the town manager.
And the market, I worked with the president of the market, and she had no issues, and I worked very well with her, Molly.
Just trying to clarify
and it worked fine.
the process, that's all. So.
So it's more of a formality than a,
Yes.
That's useful.
All right. Thank you, Jeremy.
That's helpful.
That was very clear. Thank you, Jeremy. Now you
Yeah.
can go have your dinner. Thanks, Jeremy. With
Yeah.
that, board, any questions or a motion to?
sorry, just one more.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
Would it make sense to try to address the next year's license sooner rather than later? Because it seems to create some anxiety, the waiting.
By sooner, what do you mean?
Well,
Like next month?
I mean, maybe we handle it the way that we handle the,
Yeah.
licenses for like wind jammers and day
Exactly, and
sailors.
snowball.
Yeah,
you
with
know.
the same timeframes, the fall for the upcoming
That's
spring.
fine. I thought that's what we were going to do.
because having people say, are you going to renew it? Are you going to renew it? And I say, personally, I can't see any reason why it's not going to be renewed, but
There's no reason why we can't do it sooner. There's no reason.
Jeremy's,
Jeremy?
This has been the standard practice since we've had the license agreement with the market. We've done it, and I don't mind trying to move it up. That's fine. The market themselves is kind of, we work with the president, and they're a little disassociated with especially the Wednesday market, so there's some confusion on the market side. But the town communication with the officers of the farmers market has been very good, and I think we can bring this to you sooner than we have in the past.
Okay.
And that works.
All right. Thank you. With that, do I have a motion from the board?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded by 3. Any other comment?
Nope.
All those in favor? 5-0. Thank you, Jeremy. With that, we'll move forward to the bid award for the police cruiser for the Camden Police Department. The bids are in our packet.
and Randy,
Is he there?
there we go. I can.
Thank you very much, Allison. I have to call him Chief Gagney,
Chief Gagney.
as he sends me bad emails.
Gagné. You can use the French pronunciation also.
Unlike the way that in our packet, I think it says Gagnon.
Gagnon.
Oh.
No, Gagnon.
Gagney.
It's like,
It's probably a swear.
No,
it was, yeah.
There he is. Randy, you can hear us?
can now.
You look like a man in the shadows. Do you have any lights in your home? Thank you.
Yeah, it's just got to turn the computer. I was hoping to join you in person, but I had a late appointment in Belfast this afternoon, so I'm from my recliner tonight. It's actually pretty comfortable.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Mine's not, but go ahead.
Yeah, in your package, you have a price for a new cruiser. And the first thing you'll notice is that it is not a hybrid. I can give you a long story on this. In late winter, I went out to bid for a cruiser in Rockport, and we did not get any bids returned. So when I started calling dealers, they said, yeah, there's no cruisers available. If you can find anything, you better grab those cruisers when you can. I, in turn, ordered 2 cruisers for Rockport at the same time. They were supposed to be 26 weeks. I was supposed to get them around July 1st. I just took delivery of one of those cruisers last week, and I probably won't see the next one until mid-October. Getting that information, I talked with Audra, and I said, look, Quirk is willing to let us order a hybrid cruiser, and if we don't take it, then they have no issue with being able to sell it because the demand is far outweighing the supply of cruisers. So the cruiser I want to move into a secondary role has got 116,000 miles on it. I recently put about $4,000 into it. New board members don't know, and I've explained this to other board members in the past. When I took over as chief, we used to turn our cars over every 2 to 3 years. Now I'm trying to push them out to at least 4, and this one is a 2016 that we're looking to push into secondary duty. So we've got 6 years out of it. I do have a 2014 that we would be most likely wholesaling out. It's not in that great a condition. I got word 2 weeks ago, that the hybrids are not going to be available. There was a very short window that they made the hybrids. And I'm assuming that due to the demand, and there's also a letter in there from Ford that I got with one of the Rockport cruisers that explains the supply and demand issue. I think what they're doing is the gas models far outsell the hybrid models at this point. So they've gone into production of those to try to meet the 22 orders, but they're also trying to push orders for 22s off to 23 because the supply is not going to be there. So Quirk has got a gas model that they will make available to us for the $34,000 and whatever the $100 figure is. Any new cruisers after that are going up $6,000, so that cruiser will be at $40,000. The hybrids, if you could get one, would be coming in at $45,000. So I know it's not exactly what we want because we wanted to continue down the road of hybrids. However, in 2024, Chevrolet is coming out with a police-specific Chevy Blazer that is all electric. I think if we are to purchase this gas model, even though it's not keeping with buying a hybrid at this point, that it'll put us in a better position down the road. It'll give us vehicles with low to mid mileage. I have a Dodge that has about 60,000 miles on it. I will tell you that I've had the top end of that engine rebuilt already once. I thought it might have been a fluke. The Rockport Cruiser of the same age and about the same mileage has also had the same thing done.
Okay. So go ahead, Randy.
I'm hoping that's going to take care of it and it's not going to happen again, but I don't know. We have
Charger?
That's the Dodge Charger.
I see.
That's not one, that's got 60, so we'll push that one out for another year or so. I'm thinking if we miss the boat on this cruiser, it's going to be sold because they really wanted to know if we wanted it or not. And like I said, the demand is out there.
Right.
A lot of people didn't get the cruisers, so I think it's probably what we should be doing is to jump on one that we know is a guarantee. I do want to continue down that path. If this 2024 Blazer goes in the first quarter, like we say, the thing about these police-specific vehicles is they come pre-wired. So we're not playing the game of do we cut the red wire or the blue wire and take a chance of voiding our warranty if we cut the wrong wire when we're trying to upfit for lights and stuff. They come pre-wired, which I don't want to be the first one that cuts the wrong wire, or has somebody outfitting one of those, and we void a warranty on a brand-new vehicle.
Right,
Because that can be quite problematic.
right.
And also, we'll have them wiring these things into a totally electric vehicle, which not many, if anybody around here has done one of those at this point.
Okay. Randy, here before I open to comments, questions, you need about 34, just over 34,000 for the vehicle, plus is about 10 or 11,000 for various equipment, plus another 1,000 for signage, I'll call it.
Right.
Correct.
We may be able to transfer some of the equipment. Would we put that other vehicle into a secondary role? What I mean by secondary role is we use that for animal control.
Yeah,
We try not to transport any dogs that don't have current tags on them because we don't know if they've been vaccinated or not. We don't want to take a chance of rabies or parvo or anything like that getting into one of our primary cruisers.
right.
You know, Fido, the dog we pick up on a regular basis, we know he's been vaccinated. We don't really mind doing that. We also use it for a backup cruiser because it's fully equipped if one of our cruisers goes down and somebody's away at training or something to that effect.
Okay, so just for round numbers, I think we're looking at about $46,700 rounded off. I didn't add the exact
Yeah, I'd like to add 1,500 to that, Bob, just as a figure, because I am going to have the outfitter probably strip that. When Scott got done, that took away that person that Scott used to strip some of our old cars because he had a lot of knowledge in electronics and whatnot. If I don't have to spend that, and, you know, I certainly won't. And I think we had budgeted, I don't have the figures, I had it in my office. I think we had budgeted around 55,000 for a new cruiser because we didn't know what the price factor was going to be, so.
Yes. So with
No,
the 1,500, you're about 49 not to exceed.
My math is different.
What do you have?
Just under 46 plus the 1,500 Randy asked for.
Okay. Okay. So total, Tom, what do you have?
That would be 47.5, and that still gives you $145 leeway from what I have.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like I said, we may not have to get to that point of stripping. I mean, if it's just removing the cage
Yeah.
from the vehicle that we want to, I think when your last meeting, when you approved the fire department's truck, that truck will probably be wholesaled. I got to say, I don't like dealing used police cruisers out to the public. They've been used pretty hard. That 2014 has served us well, but it's not in great shape. It would be a wholesale type vehicle. I hate to see somebody bid on something thinking that they're getting, you know, a decent vehicle, and that probably is going to need some work. So if you're going to wholesale out the fire department's truck, probably that would be a good time to do that as well.
With the police cruiser. Any questions, board? Allison?
I mean, just going back to the discussions that we had at the budget committee, when this was budgeted, it was, you know, it was basically said that it was an impossibility that it would be anything but a hybrid. I think I remember you saying that, you know, really all they're making now are hybrids, and...
No, I did not say that because they still make both those models. What I said was we were planning on buying a hybrid, and that's what I bid for, was a hybrid, but we can't get that hybrid.
Now, what about looking at a used one?
We're buying
Hold us
somebody
over
else's.
until we can get something else.
We'd be buying somebody else's used vehicle, and I don't see any sense of doing that. We've got used vehicles now.
Yeah,
Other
I mean, I do
comments?
constantly hear that, you know, the issue with the idling and the, you know, there are obviously many reasons that I don't need to go over again and again for why we had decided to move in the hybrid
What I don't want
direction,
to, what I don't want to do, Allison, is keep putting $4,000 into used vehicles or old vehicles. You know, if we push this into a secondary role, it's going to get very limited use. We have my hybrid that's getting about 37.9 to 39.9 miles per gallon. We currently have a hybrid SUV that's being used. I tell the officers, don't idle them during the summertime. We do have to idle them during the winter because the batteries go dead in it because there's so much equipment in there. So.
Other comments, board? I have a motion to approve, and if you do, it would be in the amount of, what would you say the total you came up with, Tom?
47.5.
Yeah, I make a motion to approve $47,500 to purchase the new police vehicle from Quirk that Randy wants.
A second. I second.
I was just checking the math. Okay. Make sure we give them enough here to cover it.
Yeah.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? 4-1. Thank you very much, Randy. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you. Moving on to another bid award. We have a bid award for the Snow Bowl Stream Stabilization. Audrey, just intro it, and then we can ask Beth to come up if she'd like, and answer any questions.
Yes. So do you want me to intro? So
Intro, please.
a lot of this is work that needs to be done to remediate the damage that was caused by the October storm in 2021. There was just a lot of erosion that resulted from that storm on the mountain. And so a lot of this work was identified through work that we're doing to try to permit the site through the site law through the SLOTA process. So in order to move forward with that, this remediation work needs to be done. Fortunately, Beth and Jeremy have done the work to make sure that 90% of it is going to be reimbursed by FEMA. And so Beth can give you details on what it's going to entail, and we can talk about the bids that we received for it.
Yep.
So there's 3 sites at the Snow Bowl that the storm damages that FEMA's looking at currently. This one had a time frame because it is a stream bank. Gartley and Dorsey helped draw up the plans, also got us the permitting to fix it. And so we wanted to get it out to bid ASAP because there is a deadline of completion date of October 14th, which we might have to push because we didn't realize we were going to have to come to the board for permission on this one, given that FEMA's reimbursing us. But so tomorrow I'm going to let the bid winner know so they can get working. But with that said, I don't know if you visited the site and seen it, but where the access road goes down to the Hosmer Pond, it's chipping out some of the asphalt, and it's eroded about 3 feet. So they're going to stabilize that and get that back in working order, so.
Is that the principal scope of work? Is that area that your slope stable, that's the only area of
So
slice?
the 2 other areas,
That's right.
well, there's actually 3 areas on the mountain. There was,
Yep.
on Coaster Trail, there was a
Yep.
big sinkhole washout that we had to fix.
Yep.
You could park a VW bus in it, it was that large. And then there was the access road up to the pump track. I hit the mic. Which FEMA's currently looking at, and they're going to give us a price to put it back in working order. We can remediate if we choose, but it can't be any more money than what would be to repair it to the original design. And then the access road all the way up is also being looked at by FEMA.
I couldn't hear the last part of your sentence, sorry.
The access road that goes all the way up underneath the triple chairlift
Right.
was also majorly damaged.
So, Beth, I understand all 3 of those projects are part of the standard site law permitting? The
Well,
access
the
to
whole
the pump?
site is.
All of it?
Yeah.
But those are the 3 things that have been identified that need to,
Go to FEMA.
Okay.
For reimbursement.
Right.
so how does that FEMA process work? Are they involved in the boat launch?
Yes. Well,
Okay.
they're involved in terms of, they're going to look at whoever we choose, and they're going to pay us back for this work that we did, because we didn't do it in-house. The way FEMA works is, I'll tell you, it's a process. It's a full-time job. If we do the work, like Dave at Public Works did a lot of the work along the roads that
Yep.
got eroded, because we had to fix it quickly, and they call that forced labor. And you go and then you apply for FEMA damage, and you have to show payroll, you have to show fringe benefit, you have to show who drove what tractor and for how long, and what pickup brought them all to the site. A lot of details. And thank goodness, back in 2018, I had a little tiny project and learned a lot from that on keeping details, because FEMA wants everything in order. So yes, the site law is one thing that we're trying to do for the Snow Bowl, because we're almost at the 20 acres of developed property. We have to do that. This is different because it was damaged in a storm, and FEMA's going to help reimburse us with some money.
So those other two projects, FEMA's doing estimates, but this project, they're reimbursing.
So the estimates, the forced labor was the only thing that we did with Parks and Rec was the coaster work. And we've already submitted that one. That one's already gone through. And we're looking at around $19,000 of reimbursement.
This is a separate package. This, we're considering tonight, is a separate package.
But it's
that
part
will
of the
be
FEMA
paid-
reimbursement.
Part of FEMA
So
reimbursement.
the town will hopefully not have to pick up any of this money.
Right.
This is all going to be paid by FEMA.
90%.
Do we know that for sure? I think 10% that the state picks up, so it is 100%.
My question, I just want to make sure I'm clear about this process here. So for the triple access road and for the access road to the pump track, FEMA creates budgets for those two,
To put back to the original design.
create a budget for the boat launch.
No, because they knew I had engineers working on it and that I was going to go out to bid for it. So they wanted to know what that total comes to. And then they will hopefully pay that bill.
Okay.
It's not unlimited, but as long as it's reasonable.
So in-house, it's forest contract. If we go out to bid and they see our policies on how a town goes out to bid, then, and I send this off to them, they will pay for the engineering, the permitting,
Right.
and the work.
Right.
Yeah.
Allison?
So the engineering that's already been done, is that, they're going to pay for that too,
Yes,
even though it didn't go out to bid?
correct. Actually, the town has already paid for the engineering. That is getting submitted with this.
How much did the engineering cost?
3,000, I think, around 3,000.
That sounds about right.
And so it's, you said at the beginning that it's connected to the site law permitting, but it sounds to me like this is actually completely separate.
Well, the way that it's connected is that when we restarted that process and they started assessing the condition of the mountain, we couldn't really move forward with the SLOTA permitting because the mountain was in such poor condition. So we had to make these fixes in order to move forward with that.
Right. Jeremy, you have your hand up. Do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Garland Dorsey's working with us on the site law permitting, and as part of that, they identified some of these issues that Beth has described. And part of the process is DEP will likely do a site visit. And once that site visit happens, there's going to be some issues if we don't have a plan and haven't started addressing these. And with the FEMA funds, it's a perfect time to deal with this. And what Beth was trying to say, and maybe I can try to say it a little clearer maybe, is they will pay for 90% of the fix as is. The original design, they'll pay for 90% of that. The state will pick up 10%. If we want to do mitigation, meaning something different, in order, hopefully, so, potentially it may not happen again or just something different, they will pick up that cost entirely, 90%, as long as it doesn't exceed the cost that it does to fix the way that it was originally designed. Is that clarifying? And this project is specifically for the boat launch access road. We need to get that done this quickly, because if you can imagine that being wide open for spring runoff, and I think everyone has seen Hosmer Pond Brook run like it does, likely the rest of that road will end up in Hosmer Pond. And we need to fix that before that happens.
Go ahead, Allison.
I think Tom had his hand up before me.
So I just want to be clear, and it's a little more broad here, the standard site law permitting. So there were 4 things: the sinkhole on coaster, and then these other 3 we have identified: the boat launch, the triple access road, and the access road to the pump track. Do we have a plan in place to get those other 2 done? It seems like we've addressed the two smaller ones. The triple access road's a big one.
So in July, FEMA sent out, 4 or 5 people from all
Yeah,
over?
there were about 5 people that were up on the mountain with us, estimating it, walking the site, looking at existing conditions, all
Taking
that.
measurements, knowing how much gravel and inch minus and stuff like that, and they were going to come back with a cost. But those 2 projects I'd also like to go out to bid for. And so it's one of those things that we're kind of all in this waiting game. They're going to give us an estimate, FEMA is going to give us an estimate what they think it would cost for us to put it back to its original state. If we choose to change that in any way, say we take out all that black fabric from underneath that creates that water slide once it gets to that level, and maybe put vegetation there, or there's all kinds of different ways of doing it than the way we did it and saw it erode,
Yeah.
then we have that choice within the time frame of putting these together. Is that helping at all, Tom?
It is. I'm just curious if we have a more of a comprehensive plan. I'm grateful that we're fixing this one problem. Curious about the
Dorsey
whole.
are currently working on the road, engineering the road and the big road. That's going to take them a lot of time.
Okay, good.
Jeremy?
And that's exactly right. Darlene Dorsey, like Beth said, Darlene Dorsey's working on those plans already.
Okay.
We're trying to get that in line. We are looking at other options, so we don't run into this. And can we get rid of some road areas that don't need to be gravel, don't need to be hard compacted surfaces that can erode? Can they be vegetated in certain areas? Those are the things that we are looking at.
Right. Allison?
Yeah, so the boat launch, wasn't that just recently engineered?
Yep.
Who did that engineering?
Garrett Landorski.
Okay, so it seems very prone to flooding, obviously. The path that the water travels over that road. We're going to fix this spot, but isn't that usually, a lot of the time when you reinforce one area, it just washes out? I mean, I understand that we absolutely kind of need to patch this up, but I sort of, to Tom's point, asking them to look harder at like long-term solutions that don't just like.
Don't forget that we also just put in that huge culvert.
I know, but this happened
Right before.
afterwards, so
Well, I
this
know,
isn't
but
connected to that.
it could be.
That didn't wash out, but.
Jeremy's putting
I mean,
his-
Gartland Dorsey engineered that too.
Jeremy, you had your hand up?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Allison, I understand your point. You don't want to create continue the problem, or you don't want to do something that will fix this problem but will cause a problem somewhere else on the stream. And Gartland Dorsey, we did look at other options in this area. And if you look at the deflection, and I had this conversation with Will, if you look at the deflection of the runoff coming into that bank, we looked at what does it take to really fix that stream. That would be a full-on NRPA permit, restore the stream channel. It was a very complex and complicated process. Right now, any deflection that would come off of that riprap would go back into more of the alder wetland type area. So there's not a concern that you're going to, on the other side of that stream bank, cause a significant problem because of the way the wetland is and the way the stream is. If you look at that stream, it comes down in a channel and then it kind of, it opens up into a wetland, and you've got a big thread of that stream that runs along immediately adjacent to the road. But at high waters, you have another thread that goes into the alder wetland areas, if you understand. I mean, I think you probably understand what I'm referring to.
I absolutely understand. Some of the water isn't just caused from the stream, it actually runs over the road when flooding happens elsewhere. But, I mean, we
Really
could,
with the new culvert.
I'm going to bring us back to this agenda item. Are you saying we shouldn't be approving this scope of work?
I think that we have no choice but to fix this
I see.
now, but that it was, I don't know, a year ago that we looked at the SLOTA stuff and said, let's allocate some funds to actually
Right.
have a comprehensive stormwater management
Yes,
plan here.
yes.
And I guess I'm a little concerned with the engineering that we keep,
Chasing
since that boat launch was just engineered.
Yep.
Some of this was a foreseeable issue, and that the fact that that washed out.
I mean, we had a storm event. I mean, that was a FEMA presidential declared disaster of 7 inches of rain in the course of,
Less than 8.
I don't remember what it was,
I mean,
12
absolutely,
hours.
but I think we all know that was starting to happen beforehand also. So, I mean, yeah, we should absolutely move forward and do this, but sometimes we talk about the things going out to bid and spreading business around, and occasionally, I think it's worth it to get a different opinion on how something might be
Yep.
engineered.
Yeah. Well, if nothing else, a comprehensive look at what the end goal is.
Yeah, I'd like to
Look at
see
the
that
end
at some
goal
point.
and then schedule that out and scope it out as the steps you make to get to the end goal. That's really what you're hitting on. I
I mean,
agree.
the ultimate goal is really to protect the water quality at Hosmer
No,
Pond.
we get
right?
that, we get that, but I think to Allison's point, if we should be doing a comprehensive picture so that it helps us, because it kind of feels like we're approving segments.
I agree.
And that's what the site law permitting process does do,
Yeah, I
Bob.
understood, very clear, I've done it, I understand site law, but like I said, it's just from our perspective, I agree with Allison, I don't have any problem approving the scope of work, it's not it, it's just that, it's kind of like the discussion we had about I&I, and we said, what's the
Yeah.
plan going forward to get to an objective?
Does FEMA do they have engineers up on the slope? Is that who they have? They're doing cost estimates?
Oh, yeah.
Would that be something that would be worth asking them to give us an overview of what they think would be a good?
I don't think Siemens does civil engineering.
He said FEMA.
FEMA.
Oh, FEMA. Okay. FEMA had their engineers up with us.
I mean, have they given you a general idea of what they would like to see on the snow bowl to prevent erosion and these events and
really
the
FEMA's
sediment in the
issue.
pond?
That's more of like a
FEMA's just about
DEP
paying
thing.
reimbursing.
Yeah, I wouldn't go there.
The only problem with that, when I say ideally, it would be somebody from the DEP who's working with us on the SLOTA application process that would come and kind of,
Make
it would be a bit iterative and back and forth with them.
Well, let's-
They're just not in a position to allocate resources to do that
I think
right now.
what we have to do here is move on this need for this work right now, but I'd like to see the board receive something that looks at the longer view, the longer plan for what areas we have to focus on and what the overall schedule for that is. Not schedule, but, the objectives, and I know we don't have dates, but it sounds like, we're doing chunks, and we should, but where is this leading us in the end
Well, that's
game?
the whole point of going through the SLOTA process.
Right.
And what we're saying now is, in order to even get there,
No,
we just need to fix
I
that.
get it, but we're talking about next steps already, I've heard them.
Right.
So those just need to be explained, outlined, that's all.
Right.
So we understand.
Which will happen through the SLOTA process.
But the last time that the board we talked about the SLOTA stuff, and I think sometimes maybe staff, because you guys are doing so much stuff in the background, you might lose a little bit of perspective about what the last conversation with us was. And so when we voted to do that site law permitting stuff, there was discussion about how, it was the right thing to do, even if we weren't being forced. But then we got an update that was like, oh, well, it turns out we don't actually have to do it. We might not actually have to do it. And that, I should have spoken up right then and there and said, hold on, just because we don't have to do it, maybe we should be doing it. But I think we want an opportunity to have a conversation at some point about, the comprehensive planning there, and to say, even if we can get away with not doing something over there, should we try to get away with it or
One last
not?
comment, Jeremy, then we have to move forward. Jeremy, you had your hand up?
No, we have to do the site law. We have exceeded the 20 acres. And so DEP is working with us to make sure that we go through this process.
All right.
Great.
I think we can approve this, whatever scope we approve here, but with a request that we have some kind of a vision to the future and what's coming down to get us to where we want to get. I think that can be verbal, doesn't have to be detailed, but we don't want to lose sight. I'm losing sight of where we're going with these pieces. And that's just a question, really, more than anything else. But to that end, do you have a recommendation of these three bidders?
I recommend that we go with Farley and Company, the lowest bidder.
And now does that include somebody to oversee this and make sure that the erosion control is in place? Obviously, this is a time of year that is very.
Sorry, you're looking there, I'm looking there.
Is very close to when there have been major storms, and is this going to be a job of a town staff person to do this, or Gartland Dorsky?
It is a project that we have to permit. We're permitting it locally as well, so we have to do erosion control inspections, and we'll be on them as we are, most everyone. This one probably more than anyone else, but
Erosion
we'll be out there doing inspections, myself and Clint.
Just to be clear, erosion control rests, the responsibility of erosion control rests with the contractor. We're inspecting to make sure that's in place.
Correct. We're expecting as if they're a private, this is a private property and someone is having a project done. That's how we're inspecting this project.
Now, what, you said it has to be completed by when?
This says October 14th, but we need,
Is that because of DEP?
I'm not sure why that date was chosen, Jeremy, do you remember?
There is, as I recall, there is no specific date certain that we need to have that done because it is a stream bank erosion stabilization project, not a, there are dates tied to, culvert replacements and bridge replacements, but a stream bank stabilization. And as I understand, Farley has some deadlines too on their end, and October 14th, we really want to get out of there by October 14th. The storms event really start ramping up that time of year. As we know, this happened in October 7th or October, whatever it was, 8th of last year.
31st.
Just brook trout spawning, normally in streams that have been identified as brook trout spawning habitat, which this one was, and that's how we got the other grant. I'm surprised that they're letting you work in the stream at that time of year but I assume just somebody, I prefer it when there's an engineer that's been hired to design the plans, and then they're in charge of overseeing to make sure that it's all done appropriately. It seems like a lot of the time we do a great job saving money, but then it's on some staff person to, who isn't there on the weekend, and then it rains.
We can request that will come out.
If we have an issue, we'll make sure Garland-Dorsky is there overseeing and inspecting.
Yeah, in fact, as a matter of course, you should include construction administration as part of the engineer's contract.
Yes, that's.
The project.
Well, usually, most engineering scopes do include construction administration to ensure that everything's being done in accordance with their plans by a limited number of inspections. It's included in their fees. I would suggest that in the
Look
future.
at the sidewalk project right now, it's like a disaster.
Right. But to that end, Audra, last question is the money, what budget it's coming out of?
Well, I mean, we're going to get
Going to reimburse, we don't
100%
have to budget
reimbursed.
anywhere then, okay?
Bob, we've already created an account so that we can track everything that
I
we've
see.
spent. So it's so
I
easy
see.
to give to FEMA when they want to see that checks have been paid,
But
and
you're,
blah, blah,
but you're
blah.
recommending Farley the low bidder, okay?
Make a motion to approve the bid award for the Snowball Stream Stabilization by Farley.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further comments by the board?
Do we want to include anything additional for monitoring for Gartley and Dorsky if they need to be? No? Is that-
Yeah, well, I have no problem with doing it.
Managers in place.
I don't know what,
Anything is
Yeah,
additional, it will also go to FEMA. I mean, this is all this
but
FEMA
I
project.
think we should approve Farley with the proviso that you may spend up to another $500 for construction administration by the engineer.
It just shouldn't
Some
take
number, Jeremy, I don't know
Jeremy's
what it should
time.
be.
Oh, it shouldn't be town staff going out there and being like, you guys didn't do it right, you need to put the erosion control up.
This bid is separate, it's just about Farley, this is not about inspections, and we will deal with inspections on the side, and we'll get reimbursed by FEMA. So we'll work with Gartley and Dorsky to get them to do the inspections on the project. And this bid is specifically for Farley, it's not about inspecting.
I understand. I was just trying to clarify whether we needed to identify any money, but it sounds like you don't. You can just spend X hours, just the board is, I'm hearing, wants to hear that happening. That's all. So with that, we've made a motion and a second. All those in favor? 5-0. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks, Beth.
Our fourth item on our action item list is the appointment of members to the Historic Resources Committee. Just as a background here, the Historic Resource Committee, of course, has been around for a long time, done a lot of very valuable work, but right now, at this moment, we do, correct me if I'm wrong, Audra, we have an appurtenant structure demolition permit for a property on Chestnut Street, which by ordinance requires, since it's historic property, requires that there's a 120-day maximum review process by the town, specifically the Historic Resources Committee, to provide recommendations, if any, to the homeowner in that time period. So we've really got a double whammy here. We've got to get this thing moving, and the clock is ticking on the 120 days. Now, there is some in the packet regarding recommendations for Human Resources, the Historic Resources Committee, HR to me, that's what it is.
That's how I read it.
But do we have comments from the board on any of this membership recommendations? No?
Yeah, I think
Well,
was-
I should qualify that, one member, Pat Scaling, has submitted her resignation from the committee. However, she has also volunteered to, because she's had experience with this kind of a demolition permit, to participate for that action item, which is typical of Pat. She's been one of the foundations of our historic resources endeavors of the past many years, and we all thank her very much for her service, but certainly understand her decision at this point in time. So just note that Pat is not looking for an extended membership duration beyond this activity.
Unless we succeed in convincing her to continue after she really enjoys the process of
So we're not-
going through the demolition review.
I
Pat
would-
is really
I would agree with that.
wonderful. So as I think I was the most recent liaison to the Historic Resources Committee, other than, I think Matt Siegel was doing it briefly. But the recommendations of Pat, I think, are great. The people willing to do it, Rosalie Glass, Chris Fasselt, Ann Wagand, she's great at researching and many other things. And then Will Addis, Rhonda and Pat Scaling for 2 years. I guess I don't know how to handle exactly the appointment of Pat under the terms that she's requesting. Maybe we should make Will a 2-year,
Yep.
appoint Will for 2 years and put Pat for 1 year, understanding that, we don't force anybody to
No.
continue.
Where do we see that, Pat? asked?
It's a little bit hard to read because it contains
You
some,
mean the recommendations? The
No,
recommendations?
no, where she is indicating that she's,
she recently sent an email to Bob and me just like over the weekend.
Yes.
okay.
Came rather late, to be honest,
Okay.
Stephanie. But the current recommendations that Pat had made were Rosalie Glass, Chris Fasselt, and Ann Wygand as 3-year members expiring June 25, to appoint, was to appoint Pat Scaling and Rhonda Reimer for 2-year terms, but now we're suggesting that we would put Will as a 2-year term with Rhonda Reiner for 2-year terms, and Pat for 1-year term.
Is this project only going to take a 1 year, or?
No. it's
It'll
gonna-
take a lot
it's
less than
We're
that.
talking a month. We're basically, I don't know how far we are into the permit process, but we've got to be at least 30 days into that, or 40 or
Well, if we
more.
want to keep her, we should just keep her on the 2-year and then,
We can do anything you want, but just know that Pat's going to, she's looking to,
Janice has
she's
our-
looking to
I
pull out.
mean,
Well, you have 5 regular members and 3 alternates that are open, so
yeah.
make her an alternate. That's
Better,
Yeah.
Make her
That's a
make
good
her an
idea.
that's more in
Okay,
keeping
so-
with what she requested.
So for members, we would have Rosalie Glass, Chris Fasselt, and Ann Wagand, and Rhonda Reiner, that's 1, 2, 3,
Reisner.
4. And Will, it'd be 5, and Pat Scaling as an alternate.
So moved.
Second.
Did we
Second.
Did we specify years for those? I don't think I did.
I think you,
Okay, so-
Will and Rhonda as
Okay,
2-year.
I'll repeat. Rosalie
Rosalie.
Glass, Chris, and Ann Wagand for 3-year terms. Will Addis and Rhonda Reisner for 2-year terms, and Pat Scaling as alternate.
Which does leave a couple
Yep,
slots
it does.
open, which is great because we haven't, in the past, as we're getting committees back up and going, we haven't, we've sort of let everybody know, hey, any new people that are interested in participating. So I'm glad we're leaving a couple spots open for people that might want to be involved. And the other thing, this committee historically had met in the Walsh History Center at the library, and they were not in the practice of live streaming. But I know it's been brought up in the past. There was kind of a grace period with getting all the committees live streaming, but I think we should look to be scheduling them, in this room, where people can find them and live streaming and,
Yep.
just the same as all the rest of the committees.
So we have a motion on the table, as I described, notice I can describe it again. Do we have a second for that?
I seconded.
Second motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? 5-0. Thank you, and thanks for the good work with that committee and continuing. The next item on our action items is the appointment of Camden's representative from Mid-Coast Internet Development Corporation. Again, this is principally to replace myself as one of the directors from Camden, especially to evaluate where we're going with this whole process. With my role as chair here and also on the Mid-Coast Solid Waste, the load is it's just too many meetings, and I need to take a step back from this one. So at least this would be an interim appointment until such time as Camden, we need to make a decision on where we're going with this whole process, and that's probably nearer term than later term. Just so you know, workload-wise, the Mid-Coast Internet Development meets once a month for about 1 hour on a board meeting basis, and in fact, there's one tomorrow at 1 o'clock, which I will attend, but I'd like to have. And it doesn't have to be a select board member, but it would probably be a good idea at this point in time. So that's the purpose of this action item. Any recommendations, nominations?
Bob, can we talk about
Sure.
what the role is of that person and what Camden's future is on the
Yeah,
Development
well,
Corporation?
the role, each town that's involved, and now that includes Camden, Rockport, Thomaston, Rockland, Starks, and Morrill, each have a representative on the board, and therefore votes on matters of the board. It's the comment I made last time about, at least I know there may be some new information coming about Camden into Rockport, but this has become an initiative that's trying to utilize grant money to fund where grant money is available. And to date, that's been for small towns that are underserved.
Yeah.
Camden doesn't qualify, nor does Rockport, for that statistic, even though we may be. So there's a question mark as whether or not this can fit into whatever we decide is Camden's plans for broadband in our town. And I discussed this the last time I discussed this, and I'm not sure this is the avenue. We do need to make that decision. But as long as we're a member of this organization, which the voters approved 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, then we need to provide a director.
So what is our commitment? How long, the voters approved it? Is it a 2-year commitment to that, or is it until the voters voted that indefinitely?
There
Or
was no stipulation on the commitment. There was no
We
time.
created that entity, and it was with the idea that this entity would be the vehicle for us to receive a lot of grant money, and hopefully, the idea of power and numbers and working with all the other towns, and we're going to get all this grant money. Maybe that will come in the future, or maybe it won't. It's not harming us to be in it right now, but at the same time, it's also like we're not making progress. I think it would, if you were willing to do it, that it would be with for some reason, I think that, electrical lines and all of these things, that there's got to be some value added that you would have, and kind of just learning a little bit more about it.
I don't think it
evaluating.
can be understated how important that is as part of the whole, process around what you can and can't do and where you can and can't do it. So I think that
There are
Tom's
towns
knowledge
out
of
there
that,
that are
that's
like-
really helpful.
There are towns that have figured out, our public works department, and I'm not signing anybody up for anything, and I'm not in a position to evaluate it, but there are towns that have decided that whenever they do a project, they're just going to start laying fiber and, or stringing fiber.
Well, and
Anyway,
also the streetlights that Tom's
right,
business
yeah.
installed, there is some ability with that to do some sort of
Yeah, it's a
wireless
pole
coverage.
attachment license.
Yeah,
We're the
I
person
think,
to evaluate whether we, I don't know.
I think the wise move at the moment is to continue involvement for a short term longer until we collectively assess, and I'm happy to work with you on this, by the way. I'm not going to divorce myself from it because I have some history here. And Matt Siegel did too, but he's not here anymore. Did a tremendous amount of work as the initial director for Camden, but we need to put our heads together and make recommendations to the board.
I am willing to do it. I'm going to look, the first thing I'm going to look closely at is whether this is something that it's productive for Camden to be a part of it.
Yep, I agree with that. That's been my vantage point into my last statement was I felt that was slipping away.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Maybe there's another avenue that you identify, or we could look back at that study and see if there's something, but
Yeah.
thank you for that.
There's a meeting tomorrow, Tom. You don't have to make it tomorrow, but I'm going to be there.
Tomorrow at 1.
I'm going to be there at 1 o'clock, so
and
don't.
You're supposed to
Email
bring
me the
snacks.
details, I'll try.
If you don't, but I will be telling them tomorrow, if nothing else, that you, if we nominate you and approve, that you'll be taking my place for the short term.
Sure.
Make a motion to nominate Tom Hedstrom to take Bob's place on the Midcoast Internet Development Corporation Board or Committee.
Second.
Motion made and second. Any other conversation, discussion? All those in favor? Thank you very much, Tom.
You're welcome.
Somebody needs to tell Tom this wasn't a conspiracy, because the way this all played out, it looked like.
I have an idea.
Yesterday, he couldn't spell MIDC. With that, we have the next item, which is the scheduling of work dates, probably, a couple of dates for workshop with MDOT regarding the Union Street, Elm Street, or better known as the Stop and Go intersection. We're probably looking at, well, honestly, my schedule, probably well into October. We probably need to provide them a couple of dates and times of day, because I would expect the meeting to be live in here in Camden. Boy, what a month.
Could we make that a site visit meeting?
Yes.
I really feel like that is
Stand
an
in the street?
essential. Yeah, where they go and they say, you know, we looked at this, and this is this, and this is that, and this is the problem, because we waste so much time.
Actually, when I was speaking with our planner for this region, who called me to remind me to ask you to set it up, he suggested that a portion of the meeting should be a site visit, because it'd be easier to talk about it.
Well, first of all, I want to specify the meeting duration, so we can back that. If we want to do part of it on site, I don't care. That's fine with me, but I would expect the meeting to be an hour and a half. Okay? And then we could do, well, half an hour site walk, that's fine, and then come back and ask any questions. But, so let's assume it's going to be an hour and a half maximum, unless the board wants to make it less, but certainly not more. And we would have to, well, looking into October, oh God, what a month.
Be during daylight hours, probably.
Yes. That's why I said specified time of day. Let's see, we have board meetings on October on the 4th and the 18th, correct? Those are our dates for October. Oof. That's not going to work. How about looking at the fourth week in October for one date, which is the week of the 24th? Is anybody having comments on any day that week that works better? And time of day would probably be in the order of like 1 o'clock?
Oh, shoot, hold on, I got to figure out, when is the Conservation Commission meeting, Janice?
You guys meet the fourth Wednesday,
Okay.
so it would be
That's the 26th.
the 26th at 10, 12.
Yeah, that sounds,
Yeah, maybe
hold on, yeah, it's
maybe one day. could
12
be-
to 2, yeah, so maybe not Wednesday.
Okay. How about Monday, the 24th, for one date? One date, and that time, Audra, would be
At
1
what
o'clock.
time?
Say again? October 24th at 1 o'clock to 2:30. That's one date. 10, 24, 1 to 2:30. Okay, second date. What the heck, we might as well look into, do you know what our November dates are for board meetings? Is it the 1st? I think it is.
It
It's the
is.
first and the 15th. I would recommend Monday, November 7th is the second date, same time, same station.
November what?
7.
1 to 2:30?
Same time, yep. Same time, same station.
Okay.
So we'll just specify that, and we'll see what MDOT says. All right, that should give them enough notice to look at their calendars, too. All right, that's what we'll do. I'm just writing this down, or I'll forget. 2, 3. Okay, got it. Lastly on our agenda, we have 2 discussion items. One is that we have John Powers with us tonight, and to talk about some of the information regarding Northeast Mobile Health and its annual activity report. John, would you like to take the stage?
Thank you all for having me tonight. I really appreciate your time, and it has been a while since the Quality Committee met, and wanted to at least get this information out to the boards. A lot of activity has been going on with Northeast Mobile Health Services, and I also thought it would be a good opportunity for me to come out and introduce myself, since I started at the height of COVID as the EMS director for Northeast Mobile Health Services. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jonathan Powers. I'm a paramedic and the division chief for Northeast out of Rockport. I'm a very active practicing paramedic and will continue to do that while my back will hold out. I don't like to just send my folks out in the middle of the night and not appreciate the pain that they're suffering. So I try to stay very active being out there. I do have 22 years of experience with public, private, as well as first response agencies, as well as the state agency. For about 10 years, I was with the state regulatory office, managing a lot of their data systems, computer systems, and then all of the regulatory side of EMS. So I do come to you with a fair amount of experience. I also live locally. Which is a huge change for Northeast Mobile Health Services in the past, where I do live in Union. I was the assistant director in Union for a number of years. I was a dispatcher for Knox County 911, so I'm very familiar with Knox County. I was also about 10 years with Camden First Aid, so this area holds a real special spot in my heart. This is where I started my EMS career, and it was nice to come back, so it was very nice.
Thanks, John.
So before I go through, I see you've brought up the presentation. Before anybody gets nervous about death by PowerPoint, I will not be going through this slide by slide. That was not my intent. I feel like the data portion of this really speaks for itself. We have and of course it's open for questions and discussion. I'll happily provide any answers or if there are any questions around it, but I won't go through it line by line.
Okay.
So before you get anxious about that.
No, go ahead.
I mean, I don't mind just a quick
Why don't you just
overview
hit
of
the,
I will go through
the
the first few
highlights.
slides.
Okay.
Just to give you a little bit of updates to our
Yep.
staffing. Staffing is nationwide a huge issue. EMS has suffered through COVID miserably. We lost a fair number of staff just from the stress. We also lost a fair amount to attrition and not bringing new people in because we weren't able to hold classes. So EMS classes were at a premium. There was very few being held for about 2 years. And the statewide system relies on about a cash for about 1,500 people that leave and then come into the system. We weren't bringing in those 1,500 each year. So it hurt a lot. So our staffing has held pretty strong. I was actually I'm very proud of our staff and what they've been able to accomplish and sticking with it through all of the challenges that we've been through. We do have a fair number of open positions still. As you can see, I have 6 open positions. I know the numbers are a little confusing there with saying that I have 5 full-time and 4 open positions, but I have 9 full-time openings for paramedics. I just have 4 that are currently open. 2 of those opened most recently. They've gone on to other jobs, other positions, but I do have 2 fairly strong per diem staff that come in and fill in those holes, and the rest of them really make up the bulk of that. We were fortunate, we didn't lose any to vaccine mandates. We thought that was going to be a pretty significant loss to EMS as a whole. We were very fortunate we didn't. My staff were actually first in line, and then we're very active in helping administer vaccinations throughout the area. Through a strong relationship with Windward Gardens, we were actually the first in the region to be vaccinated for public safety. Before the public safety vaccines were released and available, we were able to get in line with Windward Gardens because they recognized that we were going to be a vector. whether they liked it or not, we were going to have to come into their facility for their patients. And they wanted to make sure that we were the safest possible going into their facility. So they offered those to us right up in the very beginning. So we're pretty fortunate there. We are now facing a few more mandates where the state has now not just the COVID vaccine, but now mandating the flu vaccine, which is going to be our next hurdle. So we're going to see more and more of that. Some people in our profession forget when we had to have MMR and TB and all these other tests and vaccinations when we first started, but it's all part of the job. So I think we'll weather that pretty well. So just our daily staffing, we do staff 3 ambulances daily. That's ideal. Some days we do have to drop down to the 2, but I very, very rarely drop below 2. We do have the 2 that are 24 hours a day, 6A to 6A, 7A to 7A, and then the third one is a 12-hour truck during the busiest hours, which seems to be both 911 as well as transfer time between 8 and 8. 84 is a fully staffed or fully stocked truck, but it is not staffed routinely. We use that for special events such as at the Snow Bowl or anything like that. If I can muster up a partner during the day, we'll use it as a 4th truck. And then I also have a fly car that we use that I'll first respond in or back up other crews. So just our current fleet, you can see that all of them are fairly new. 2020 actually, as appropriately numbered as that truck is, continues to surprise me every day. And it actually just went out of service. It is the most appropriately numbered truck ever. It was the worst vehicle under the face of the earth to go along with the year 2020. And it's gone out of service. So we actually have the 3 new trucks, and we just brought another truck similar year to our fleet, which has actually been rebuilt, very reliable. And we rotate these trucks to try and keep the mileage down on them.
Sure.
We're facing right now a 2-year backlog to replace ambulances. If we're lucky, it'll be 2 years before we see a new ambulance. Wow. So we've our fleet department has put into place a plan to refurbish some of our aging apparatus. So like the 2016, we'll probably go for paint, and anything that moves underneath the chassis will be replaced.
I see.
1952, which we just put into service, had just had that done, and it's been going for about 20,000 miles and with no problems. So we're pretty pleased with this plan. Hopefully it'll work out well for us. So in 2021, just because we haven't met and had the opportunity to present for quite a while, in 2021 we did participate in a number of vaccine initiatives, primarily in the Lincolnville area. The Waldo County reached out to us, as well as the town of Lincolnville, to try and offer some vaccine clinics to an underserved area. Rural Waldo County, if you look on the CDC maps, there's a whole swath of under-vaccinated areas.
Sure.
And Lincolnville was kind of on that edge of that, so it worked out really well. We were very pleased with the turnout. We saw a lot of folks from all over the state. I'm surprised when we were processing folks from Dover, Foxcroft to Cumberland to all over creation.
So I just have a question. The total number, 585, what, people vaccinated?
COVID-19 vaccinations that we administered.
Okay, so these are not the number of clinics you've held?
No, these are just the individuals. Yep, these are the individuals. So not a huge number, but it was providing to an underserved area that wasn't seeing a whole lot of numbers then. So a few other initiatives that we've trying to rebuild part of our structure, particularly around service level quality assurance, so making sure that what we're doing is at the highest standard. Some of that with COVID also waned a little. We've tried to bolster that back up. We've hired a new medical director, Dr. Busco, who is a tenured physician with St. Joe's in Bangor. Very active with EMS. He spent a number of years on the Medical Directions and Practices Board, which is the oversight committee for creating statewide protocols for EMS. So he's very familiar with EMS. He was also a practicing paramedic years ago down in the Carolinas, and has been a nice breath of fresh air as far as our education and then reviewing what we're doing as far as practice goes to make sure that we're doing the best we can. We've hired a new quality assurance director. He is out of our Brunswick division, but Steve Almquist is a practicing paramedic, is also helping out with a lot of the day-to-day reviews, the chart studies, those types of things. So if anybody doesn't know, for every response we do a full medical record entry. So those can be reviewed later for data, they can be pulled for quality assurance. And Steve's responsible for going through and reviewing those, particularly for cardiac arrests, patient refusals, which are a high-risk situation for us. So we're folks who don't want to go to the hospital.
Right.
You know, we take that full liability on basically ourselves when we say, okay, you know, if you don't want to go to the hospital, let's keep you where you're, so just make sure you're safe. Sometimes those things work out really well. Fortunately, knock on wood, in my time, I haven't seen too many poor outcomes to that, but we do monitor those very closely. We have a fair number of them in this area. As you went through the packet, you probably saw we have a high number of gravitational disturbances that don't always result in injuries.
What are gravitational disturbances? Oh,
False.
How's in the Star Trek kind of?
A lot of folks fall.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, we still can't narrow it down, but a lot of folks in this area fall, probably more than any other area that I've worked in. And it doesn't result in injury, but obviously, we can't x-ray them, we can't guarantee they're not injured. So we do review those, make sure that a thorough assessment was performed, vital signs were assessed, and that there was a good, thorough assessment of that patient before we say, yep, you don't need to go to the hospital.
I noticed that you don't list Nexolone or any opioid crisis remedial.
We haven't done, so we aren't specifically reviewing that for quality assurance. The state took that on as a much larger project. I do participate with some of the local groups to make sure that we're addressing this concern. To date, it has not been a huge issue. We go in waves. It kind of comes and goes, really waxes and wanes in this area with the use of Narcan. So we haven't really focused it for our agency, but the state has been taking a hard look at that.
Great.
And then one of the biggest things that this report kind of focused on, which was more into the contract, was the review of the 95th percentile response times, getting away from the average response time and focusing more on what's taking so long for ambulances to get there. So we do review 100% of those. Yeah, another quality assurance initiative that I've put a lot of time and energy into is the use of red lights and sirens. Anytime an emergency vehicle leaves a station with red lights and sirens on, it's at 65% greater risk of getting into an accident or causing an accident. Significant risk that goes along with that. Whether it be folks not paying attention, people, I can tell you pulling out of Rockport Park Center, no one cares. Especially if they're in a hurry to get to fresh off the farm, no one cares that that ambulance is pulling out. So we want to make sure that we're utilizing those lights and sirens with due regard and in only the most important times.
So you're more likely to get an accident with the lights and sirens on than with the lights and sirens off?
That's correct. Actually, in the risk of crashes, 60% of those are more likely to have injuries.
Is that possibly because are the drivers driving differently when they have those on, or you think literally people see lights and sirens and are more likely to crash into that vehicle?
Yes. We do drive a little bit faster. I mean, there's obviously the stress reaction to utilizing a very loud siren and driving fast down the road to an emergency. You get the adrenaline rush. You also have drivers who don't pay attention to what's around them. They're texting.
I'm not sharing my screen. I need to be sharing my screen
or
with people that are on Zoom. Are there people on Zoom that?
Or if it startles them, they pull off real quick. They pull into the side of you. If our operators aren't, operating correctly by, a lot of folks get mad at me at Route 90 because I'll continuously remind them that you do not pass on the right. You have that left-hand turn lane, and people, if the lane to the right is clear, they will just blow through there, especially some of my newer folks, and I continuously remind them that you do not do that. You go to the left because people are trained to pull to the right. So if you're going to the right of them and they suddenly pull into the side of you, it creates an accident. So we've taken a hard look at this, making sure that we're operating well within the national standards. Even before we made some changes, that we were very close. Now we're well within the national standards. About 40% of our calls are responded to with lights and sirens. We changed our response assignment plan to make sure that folks have a little bit of flexibility, but it's still pretty scripted that we don't go to alpha level calls with lights and sirens. Alpha level calls are low priority, low risk calls, most of your falls, and making sure that they're utilizing their tools effectively. So We have been participating in this for about a year. Like I said, our numbers have improved. Part of that, again, was a change in our response assignment plan. We do utilize the medical priority dispatch system, which is provided by the Knox County 911 Center. As you know, they dispatch our agency, and they provide these instructions. If anybody's not familiar with that, if anybody remembers Rescue 911 with William Shatner, and he used to be standing there next to the dispatch console, looking all important, and the dispatcher would pull down these cards. Those cards are the MPDS. And it's a script, basically, different questions where they ask to identify life-threatening symptoms or situations. And it's very heavily reviewed. The dispatch center is very good at what they do. So we're pretty confident in how they're coding these calls to make sure that Omega, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, which is how they code them, each one of those is varying levels of threat, life threat. So an Omega Alpha, low risk, low priority. Not that we're not going to send an ambulance to those, but we're not going to injure anybody getting there, type of situation. So making sure they're responding to those appropriately. Now, if dispatch comes back and says it's something a little more concerning, even though it's been coded at Alpha, the crew has the ability to upgrade that based off of gut feeling too. So we didn't want to take that completely away from them and make this black and white. Charlie level, those ones were a little bit more harder for our staff because things that go into Charlie level are like strokes. And while they may be time sensitive, there are strokes that are called in that aren't time sensitive, and they also don't have any life-threatening symptoms. So is it more appropriate to just get the paramedic there, or is it more important to get them there fast and risk the public or the crew? And that's what we've been looking at through this review. So a lot of time's gone into that. Like I said, our numbers are staying well within the national standards. So also part of this year's contract, we took a look at response zones so we can better identify response times. In previous contracts, we had looked at average response time throughout the town. Not real fair when you're looking at the response time to Bog Bridge versus the Quarry Hill. So we did break the town, Camden specifically, into 2 zones. You can see the village area and then rural. We tried to match what the fire department already had so we can compare apples to apples. And you can see Rockport into 4 zones, Lincolnville's 4 zones, Hope's in 2. That also helped us better identify and better utilize our mutual aid and identify the closest appropriate services if we aren't available. So like for Lincolnville, it didn't make any sense to send Rockland up to Route 52 on the Northport line. Most of those patients go to Waldo. Rockland doesn't, that takes them out too far, too long. And it's also an extended time for an ambulance to get to that person. So we entered into agreements with Belfast, Searsmont, other agencies that border us to get them to those areas a lot faster and get them back to the areas a lot more efficiently. So a lot of data review for Lincolnville zones 3 and 4 specifically, that's pretty much where anybody who goes to Waldo lives. So we try to call a Waldo resource to take them back to Belfast. So this kind of gets into the data portion of it. So the only thing I really want to point out here is that 2022, we said that our call volume was down from the previous years, and it was, and then it came back with a vengeance. We have seen the highest call volume that we have seen in years. We have got to be doubling what I remember doing at Camden First Aid. So I don't know what the influx has been. Steve's pulling numbers and looking at things to see what is changing. But we were just seeing a huge increase in our call volume. And it's not necessarily the facilities, which was our first go-to. We thought maybe the facilities were calling more, and they're actually calling less. We saw through COVID that they just didn't want us in their facility. Not because they didn't think EMS was necessary, it's just we were a vector
of disease.
So they found ways to bring more services into their residents, and they've just kept those and better utilizing their resources within the facilities. So, before I started, we saw a huge increase in the number of lift assists at the facilities. We don't see hardly any of those anymore. So I think a lot of that has shifted, but we are seeing a huge increase in our low acuity calls, stuff that when you hear it go out, you're like, when did that become an ambulance problem? But we do respond, and so.
Now, with dispatch, when somebody calls 911 and it goes to dispatch, and then they decide whether that's an ambulance or a police issue, or
Policies and procedures do. So we have policies and identify what, like for behavioral health, there are nationwide that has become more of an EMS issue than a law enforcement issue, but it's a joint venture. Generally, law enforcement responds with us to make sure that the scene is safe and stabilized, and then we'll come in and either evaluate and transport or evaluate and find a better solution, whether it be contact crisis or something like that. But that's all done by policy.
do you see opportunities for, when you're hearing something and you're thinking, oh, well, when did that become an ambulance issue? Is it that you would be thinking normally that would be a police issue, a fire issue, a public works issue? Is it an issue
or a
with
take yourself to your doctor issue in
a
most cases?
preventative kind of?
Yeah, like it could have been preventative, or 46-year-old with nausea has become an EMS issue. So we are seeing some. I mean, not to say there isn't something going on, because there certainly could be, but it's just we're seeing what we are identifying as low acuity, low risk symptoms seems to be on the rise.
You think that maybe that's because people are delaying going to the doctor because they're scared of COVID, or is there a way to make this better?
Some don't have doctors, some.
It's highly subjective, but it's related to some of those things that happened in relation to the
Wasn't
pandemic.
any taxi cabs
Yeah,
around?
yeah.
Right,
Fair amount.
I'm not kidding.
I can,
So as I said, I don't want to beat this data to death. Like I said, most of it I think
I
speaks to
actually
itself.
think it's really
but-
kind of interesting listening to this. I'm liking it.
The,
I don't know if anybody, I like listening to this.
the data that you were, this is the data you're talking, no, this, okay.
Yeah, so if there's any questions over any of this data or anything you'd
Well,
like to
just in
see.
general terms, can you just comment to how the data supports the contract that we have with Northeast?
So more so that we're meeting all of the contract objectives. We're maintaining a 95% or 99.2% of all of the Charlie Delta and Echo calls are being responded, we're responding with a paramedic. But all of our calls, so all 1,814 calls, 95% of them have a paramedic, or a little over 95%.
What percent?
95.6% of all of the calls have a paramedic. The ones that require a paramedic by contract are the Charlie Delta and Echo. Those are the ones that have the high risk, life-threatening symptoms.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure we have a paramedic on those, and we're meeting that 99.2% of the time. And the ones that we aren't, that's a very small number. Sorry.
So, and I guess
Time already, huh?
to try to close the loop on, a piece of work that was done a couple of years ago. So it was in the midst of COVID, we were doing a review of EMS services in partnership with the hospital.
Yes.
And a lot of the, items that John is speaking to tonight, and the fact that John is standing here tonight, are all points that were addressed as part of that report. So one of the major findings was that, for years there hadn't been a base manager in Rockport, and that was, creating some difficulties with communication and management and stuff like that. So they hired John, and John's standing here with us tonight. Also the breaking up zones to respond, and, a number of other things that he's spoken to are all things that were flagged in the report and Northeast implemented, and it has definitely led to improvements.
Well, I think it goes without saying that if you look at CDE, for those of us who remember the previous few slides, those are the worst situations, CDE, including cardiac arrest, 99% have paramedics involved.
On the first response. On the initial truck leaving the station has a paramedic.
That's huge. That's virtually 100%.
Yeah, I can tell you the 2 calls that we didn't have a paramedic on, we ended up calling another agency to provide a paramedic.
Oh, I see.
So we do, this day, I mean, the call had a paramedic on it, it just wasn't on the initial response.
Got it.
And the contract wants us to measure on initial
Well,
response.
given which everybody's facing in any public service sector, the availability of public safety, any availability of resources, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. I'm very, very proud of everything, of the extra that my staff is putting in to make sure that we maintain that coverage.
Wow.
Yeah, and I took an ambulance trip to Portland one night, and John was the paramedic. And I asked him, I said, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, "Well, I wanted to give my staff vacation, so I'm covering their shifts."
Right.
Patients need to move at 2 o'clock in the morning even, so.
Yeah, right. Right. That's impressive. That's very impressive.
So, John, I heard through the grapevine that part or some or all of Northeast is for sale?
Not necessarily for sale. I mean, it's a private company, so there's always the potential for somebody to make an offer. So I don't know where, I haven't heard anything as far as it being for sale. Our owners have not made that public. We do have, both of our owners, I mean, we just appointed the new COO, Rick Petrie. So to my knowledge, there are no plans.
Other questions, board? No, like I said, given the situation, I didn't expect to see numbers as high as that. In summary, that's pretty impressive.
Especially compared to last time we looked at them.
So what?
I mean, especially compared to what last time we looked at them, where they were,
Yeah,
the response times were above
Yeah, and
the
I'm,
benchmark and the national average.
I'm absolutely no expert in this area whatsoever, but I do know from people who are involved in, not here in Maine, but they've seen a tremendous increase in calls for emergency support because, and I commented, a good friend of mine who, his wife had a severe headache and they thought it was COVID and they called an ambulance. You know, and it's your point about go to get a doctor. But that's getting confused because of some of the situations occurred in fear, logical fear, that, I may have COVID and I may be on my deathbed. I get it.
Yeah.
But I think that's driving some of that.
We saw a lot of that, and I think the messaging from CDC has improved that a little bit.
It has.
We couldn't do better.
It has.
Certainly could have done better.
They still can, actually.
They still can.
Because we've just entered a new area of very confusing information coming from kind of the same source. Anyway.
No comment.
But I think as the messaging gets out there.
So what are we doing? Are we approving anything?
No,
We're just,
no,
this is just an information
we try to do this,
like an update?
We should do this once a year.
Okay.
And this, I don't think we've done one for 2 years. And so this is, when the contract is in place, when we address contract, wouldn't be, do we have a 1-year contract? But still, so it would be next spring when we'd be looking at upping the Northeast contract.
Last was a 3-year.
Oh, yes, that's right. The last contract you approved was a 3-year agreement.
Thank you. That's-
With a non-appropriation clause,
Right,
so that. yeah.
correct. So no, this is a discussion item, we're not approving anything, but
This came mostly out of the discussion that was held at the June 6th, I think it was your June 6th meeting, where it was just, we hadn't had representation. And we're on the backside of COVID. Now I feel like, I hate doing this stuff by Zoom. I would much rather do this kind of stuff, because you can't read the room when you're reading the data.
Right.
I could be,
Right.
I saw that at the Quality Assurance Committee meeting. I can tell people are glazing over because I'm talking, but
right.
it's better when we're in person.
But I think obviously we've got to be diligent about doing this on an annual basis to see how the performance of a contract is going. It's a very important contract, obviously, but I'm sure we'll be discussing it again in the spring and whenever the next time.
This is also, John's a department head.
Yeah,
He's the
understood,
head of our
understood.
EMS department,
Any
so.
final questions for John before we go ahead?
This has been really helpful. I don't know that I've ever received a presentation just like this, and for those of us who don't know how this all works, I will try to limit my questions. I guess the main thing that hasn't been covered is this patient surveys and complaints. For our residents, I don't think that most people kind of know where they would make a complaint about the ambulance service. I've had questions before about like billing and just things that really I don't know, how to answer those. What is the proper way if somebody wanted to say that they were, I guess it's billing-related things that have come up for me, but in general, how would somebody complain about the ambulance service or express a concern?
If it's the billing side of things, it's on their bill. Is the best process. The phone number on there is the easiest and probably the best way to reach out. If they have concerns about operations, the care that they received, my experience has always been it's gone through the town office. Or directly to me. Rarely directly to me, though. More often than not, it's been through the town office.
Right.
Do you get a lot of calls from people that are feeling like they can't pay a bill?
We do, and we do have a process where we can write it off, or we'll review the case for finances, and similar to your general assistance process. We do have an application process through all that, the same way that you folks have for general assistance.
Does it normally,
Or tax abatement, for that matter. I mean, probably more appropriate to say tax abatement.
is it generally covered by insurance, or?
Generally, we do run into situations where private insurance won't pay. Particularly for, more so out of the facilities, honestly. Where they feel like, these services should have been covered by the facility, why are you taking an ambulance? Those types of things. So
Do you include in the bill any information for people that, like, if you're having trouble paying this, this is an option? I know sometimes from Penn Bay, I've gotten bills that are, there's like a little thing that says, if you need to apply for free care or whatever, there are directions to do that. Do you
I'm
have
sure it's
any?
directly on the bill, but if they call the number, our billing agency is QMC out of Florida, and they'll provide those instructions in the process for them.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, John, and thank you for coming in person. We really appreciate that. It's always nice to touch the tires, or kick the tires, as we may call, but thank you very, very much.
It's my pleasure. And anytime, if there are any questions, anything, Audra has my direct number.
Thank you.
Email. I'm available 24 hours a day. I took
Again,
Wow.
that. I haven't seen the perks of the new job yet. They promised me, but I'm always available.
Thank you again, and what a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And keep it up. I mean, that's the only thing I can say. Really,
Right.
it's really encouraging to see.
The last item,
Thank you.
thanks, John. Last item on our discussion is a discussion on the revised revocable license agreement for the Camden Harbor properties on Main Street. Just as a background here, Audra, correct me if I'm wrong, the board, prior to, I think, Tom and Stephanie, we devoted to the revocable licenses that existed for these properties back from 1990-something, I think, to terminate those licenses. Notice went out, but the notice takes effect, finals on October 5th, I believe. So they are still, in sense, until the 90-day notice expires, valid until October 5th. But to the question about, I'll let you take the lead, Audra, about revised irrevocable license. Define what you're talking about, what information you're trying to provide the board.
So the specific request I received was from Lee, Montgomery, and Hawley Rutland, who own Camden Harbor properties and a number of buildings who had license agreements. One was specifically to allow their buildings to have decks off the back of them, and so
Right.
the footings of the decks were on town property.
Hung over town property.
Hung over town property. And then the other agreements allowed for several parking spaces on the gravel area on the public landing. And so I do see good sense in drafting a new license agreement that addresses the issue of the decks. However, when we're talking about the parking issue, they have requested that their parking privileges be reinstated through a revocable license. But that was, something that the prior board made a decision on in order to create equity across all the businesses in town, because not all the businesses that back onto the landing have agreements that give them specific parking spaces.
Okay.
And there's, a number of sort of old revocable licenses that give certain privileges to certain
Sure.
businesses, entities, individuals that we've been trying to, they only terminate if the board terminates them. They kind of hang out there in perpetuity unless the board takes some sort of action.
Right.
So we've been, looking for those, particularly when it comes to parking, because there's a direction and desire amongst the board at the time to make sure that we're treating everybody equitably.
Right. So there's two issues, but the primary one is these overhangs, I'll call them overhangs. They were in the agreement that we're revoking in a week and a half. And that one, we need to address because it exists. Because there's only two options there. You either probably provide them some leeway or they have to take them down, which, is kind of extreme in my opinion, but that's what the board needs to consider. The other one is the parking part, and yes, I agree. The reason that the board already voted on that matter was the principal matter was because of the initiatives we've already taken to eliminate, to Audra's point, the businesses downtown, whether they be day sailors, windjammers, the town staff, not parking in reserved spaces, et cetera, more of a consistency kind of an approach. That's why that was the primary focus of the discussions, I recall. And at the time, when these revocable licenses came up to the board, I didn't realize that these overhangs existed over town property. So that is an outstanding issue that the board should address and give Audra some direction on.
So when those were built, they would have been inspected, permitted by the town?
They should have been.
Yes.
I wonder, have you guys seen the language of the original agreements? I would imagine this would, I'm just looking at what's in the packet, I would think it'd be really a little difficult to
Yeah.
evaluate this.
Yeah.
I know it took me a bit to wrap my head around it, the first part being just, in general where we're, I'll share my screen for just a second, but like where we're talking about. Because, having lived here my whole life, I didn't realize that this
Yeah.
section here was town property.
Yep.
And, so part of this was an agreement. They've been doing this, nice landscaping for years and years. I imagine there was a time when it was probably neglected by the town or something, and it worked out so that in exchange for having these free parking spots, the Montgomery family and maybe others took care of this landscaping here. But it has created this idea that this is all private property. It's like nicer than the town stuff, so it looks like it's private property. I know I've been instructing my kids for years not to walk here. So that's one of the issues. And so this area is all, it does seem like since we've terminated the overall agreement, we need to look more carefully at it all in sections.
Landscaping?
Yeah, but, because the other thing, I think Stephanie brings up a good point with these decks here, I had never had any idea that was sort of on town property. Now, does that mean that the public is allowed to walk on those? I see people walking occasionally, taking pictures. I do think it brings up a lot of questions.
Where's the liability?
Right, but I mean, maybe it seems maybe to have a meaningful conversation, it would be helpful for you guys to be able to look at the original agreements. I don't know what you think.
So
but-
say what? To look at what?
I would just imagine, having not looked at the original agreements, having that, it would just be hard
But
to understand.
the original agreement, yeah, I would agree, especially to the decks and stuff, but you really have to have a physical look out there and take a look at these decks. But the parking thing, that's just a question.
Sure, yeah.
That's just a question of being, the board, the town being consistent on limitations on no special parking for entities, period.
I think they
But I
identified
think-
6 spaces in the agreements that were in this area.
Correct. That's-
All parking licenses been revoked?
Yes.
Are we charging them anything for these parking spaces?
No.
No, for years, the agreement was that they would do this landscaping for free in exchange for the parking spaces, but this was 1990,
Yeah.
and it's one of those things that doesn't expire unless it gets
gets
addressed, so it really never even, there's
Right.
no trigger for it to come up for review,
Right.
much like the
Right.
Chamber of Commerce building.
Correct.
That I also didn't know until I looked at this, like, oh, right, that's town property too. What does that agreement say?
There's a need for the town to address its property and its landscaping, period. That's something that's the town should take responsibility for. To these building owners, there's really two issues, because they, trading parking spaces for whatever, that agreement expires October 5th. That's gone. So for new constructibility of anything, there are the issue of these decks. And that should be, in my opinion, that should be addressed. No,
Yeah,
they-
you know,
Now,
walkways.
whether public could go in those decks, that's a Bill Kelly question, and we can get that resolved real quickly, but, because I don't believe there is any liability to that, because if it's been permitted and built.
There's no, I mean, specifically in the old agreements, it indemnified the town.
It's what?
Indemnifies the town.
It indemnifies the town.
That's what I thought, and
Yeah.
that's typically the way something like that works, because they're overhanging town property. So those are the issues, really, and, Audra's looking for some direction as to what, to recraft a draft. We can table it and take a look at the agreements and bring it back, that's fine if you want to do that. But those are two fundamental issues. To me, there's a subset issue here, and this is property the town owns that is at the head of our harbor, that is it's an opportunity, it's very valuable.
Super valuable.
It's super valuable land, and we should be, in my opinion, we should have, shoulda, coulda, woulda, improved that landscaping in this area to make the head of the harbor even more attractive.
I mean, the idea that this area here is so precious. You can see it's been more and more, it's
Yeah.
getting like all the grass doesn't grow anymore because there's so much traffic. We are trying to squeeze, this looks like shows during winter, but we've got trash cans here.
Yep.
Multiple,
Yeah,
picnic table. We're trying to squeeze so much in. And there's a sign here that's private parking.
Sure.
Just in terms of a public resource that taxpayers own, I don't see how we can justify
No.
giving it away for free to a private entity.
No,
But
no.
we do need it would be good to have a plan for it.
Well, yeah, if that space is not amenable, I'm not a parking expert, to parking, then fine, take it and we use it for a landscape plan, get a landscape architect to come in and give us a quality plan for this area, the head of the harbor. There's a lot of people go down there to view the harbor, and to go on the public landing. And it's not, in my opinion, if I was an owner of that building, I would only do so much to do the maintenance. I'm not criticizing them at all, but they're not landscape architects. They're not going to go do improvements, to make this where Allison's arrow is right now, that whole area right there, a quality place to head of a harbor.
I think there's a larger whole public landing redesign that is going to happen and that we probably shouldn't
That's true.
this
That's
is
very
all
true.
crumbling over here. In the meantime,
Yep.
it should be, picnic tables have been this recurring thing that everybody wants more picnic tables.
Yep.
And we're like, we can't find any place except for these, we've been putting them in parking spots. We've been,
Village Green.
this is public, we could put a bike rack and picnic tables there,
It has the potential, I'm not saying we do a landscaping plan tomorrow, it has to go part of a bigger plan, but this is the head of our harbor. This is one of our 2 or 3 key elements of our town.
it's not really a safe place for people to, I don't think the town taking this over for public parking makes much sense.
No.
They're able to work it out amongst themselves.
Why wouldn't we enter into discussion on leasing these parking spots to them?
Because the land belongs to the town, and we need to use it for the town's benefit. That land, if it's not good for parking, can make this area just larger for the public landscaped area. That's why.
I
This is
guess
not about
that's a
money for,
possibility.
well, it's a possibility, but to me, this is not about money, about income. This is about, well, first of all, being consistent with every business we've addressed in town. We've taken away parking permits. Because I can argue the same thing for some of the other people who we've revoked parking for. We need to be consistent in my mind. 2, then it comes down to what do we want to use that space for? That's another discussion.
That's another, yeah.
Right.
Are we leasing space to anybody? Do we lease space to Harbor Dogs or any other entities down there?
Harbor Dogs, we do have a license agreement with them.
Not for parking spot, but for.
Just for their
Yeah, I mean,
space
it's the
there.
same kind of thing.
Yeah, it is. So we do lease land to various entities for various purposes.
We do license, license
that's-
agreements.
that we do.
Primarily.
And down there, it's been this thing where, because we had an application from Courtney Sukeforth wanted to put a
Popcorn.
pop-up popcorn something down there, and we realized, and she submitted, an application or whatever, and we hadn't, everybody was almost paralyzed, like, well, we know, yep, there's Harbor Dogs, but we have no
Yep.
process for deciding who's entitled to that space and who isn't. I think she had actually wanted to put it over here.
That's correct. That's correct.
And I mean, all these things are worth considering on their merits to, Rockland's leasing parking spots to businesses, but we should probably open it up to all kinds of different opportunities.
It's valuable
And
land.
figure out a process for that.
There are some times we need to reinforce that and utilize this land for something to the towns and the taxpayers' benefit.
Hey, parking is kind of the lowest hanging fruit we can.
Yeah, it's just
awful.
basic
We
stuff.
should not have parking on our
Yeah,
harbor.
we're not trying to be punitive to the building owners. That's why we want to do whatever we can to make sure that these decks and stuff, whatever they've done. But there's just a lot of these little individual islands of decisions that
Can
were
we,
made.
can we talk about that? Can we talk about the precedent? So, and maybe you don't know right off the top of your head, but Harbor Dogs actually pays money for their location?
They do, yep.
Didn't we just approve that? I think you guys were here for that.
We did. For vintner
But when
license.
we've asked, like, why is that,
So,
how did it just
yeah.
decide what's allowed and what isn't? It was
Yeah,
like,
I
oh, well, it's just
totally agree.
always, it's grandfathered, it's always.
Yeah,
been that way.
That's correct.
Are there any other ones that just, off the top of your head, stuff that we have?
Year in, year out, or
Yeah.
just kind of rolling?
Something funny
until
over
we-
here.
Where?
There is something with the dumpster and the
Yes.
Smith family.
Yes.
Oh, down there's something, yep.
Yep.
And
But do they pay for that?
I don't
They pay
believe,
the heating
believe they
bill
do.
for the public bathrooms and the pump station, I believe. Another one of those funny things that,
in exchange for the dumpster?
and I probably shouldn't be saying that in this meeting, but I believe that to be true.
Well, the bottom line was, we're saying is, to your point, Tom, I agree, but the use of this public land needs to be very carefully administered with some kind of a process, and we don't have that.
And I think at some point, there were some agreements with businesses on Bayview in regards to parking on Chestnut Street, and there's no record of it, but
Yes,
people,
yes, that's correct. That's
these
correct.
makeshift parking permits that they hang, and our parking officer observed them, so, yeah, there's,
Right, those private parking signs in bizarre places, is that what you're talking about? Or?
I just feel like there isn't any plan in place, so we're just going to say nope to everything, and everybody get out, and it's not real parking, so it's just going to be empty. It's a year parking.
No, we can set.
License
temporarily-
agreement.
Temporarily, we can set it up as
That's,
parking if we want to. We
you
can
know,
expand the parking spaces.
Even like till like June 1st or something, I don't know. I'm just saying, just give time to
It's delaying
figure
the
out what's
inevitable.
going on.
It's just
Well,
delaying
we
the
started
inevitable.
revoking all those parking
right.
agreements
That's right.
last year.
That's correct.
So we started a process to
correct.
level the playing field, to start rethinking about what we can do with the public lending. So
We haven't
even-
done anything.
Let's say
Maybe
we,
the highest good is
That's a
actually
different-
some money, like there is a price where it is beneficial to the town to say, okay, you have the winter to be there, I don't know what the right price is, and I'm not saying this is necessarily what I want to do, but if, in the interim, there's a price for everything that actually becomes beneficial to the town, if it's,
let's say we do approve this and we take those parking spots back. What,
We're not approving anything. We're
or
giving
excuse
it-
me, discussion. Yeah, but let's say that's the course we want to take.
Sure.
There is a valid point here to be made that shouldn't we have a plan in place for what we are then going to do with them?
Well, but you got to start somewhere. We have, like I said, we revoked parking because I'd like to see a plan begin its process of being put in place. Delaying the inevitable is if I'm a business owner, I don't want that. I want either I have it or I don't. Because you know why? I'm in the business of leasing my space to people, subleasing, and I want to be able to tell them whether they have a parking space or not. Oh, no, you might have it for another 6 months, or maybe not.
I'm just saying that Sophie just said that we started last year, so
Yes,
it's
we
already
did.
been a year and we
We
have
did.
nothing going on, so why are we
Well,
enforcing?
you'd say the same
this?
thing about the other parking
Well,
spaces.
it's not it's also not officially revoked until the 5th. So
Right.
there was that
Right.
90-day period.
Well, and this, because this revocation occurred a long time ago when we had the meeting here, and the business owners came and talked about their concerns and blah, blah, blah. But it was all about being consistent with the revocation of parking spaces. We could say the same thing about, the other entities that we've revoked their parking permits down in that area and others. Why not, why, we don't have a plan, and why are we revoking those to be consistent? If you're going to do something as a board, all I can admonish us to do is be consistent. And I agree, the town meeting form of government moves like molasses uphill in a snowstorm. But that's not the point. The point is, we did revoke it, we have revoked it, it'll expire October 5th. Now, we can take a look at certainly elements for a new agreement with them. But again, I think Stephanie brought up a good point. I think give it to a short term. That's kind of like hanging a carrot out that I don't approve of. Either you do or you don't.
Audra, if we did take action here, what would your instructions be? I mean, is it the harbor master? Is it the public works? Is this a park? What would the instructions be to care for that location now? Because now we are responsible for it.
Yeah, so I mean, it would be either a Parks and Rec crew or a Public Works crew, probably most appropriately Parks and Rec, if we want it to be, a landscaped area with bushes that we're pruning. That would be who would maintain it if it were kind of to be left as it is roughly now. But there are other things that you could do, like you could say you want another spot for like a food vendor of some type. We could do an RFP for another food vendor and pick a spot for them, and you could
In the area where the
determine.
current parking is, probably.
It would be near it. It would certainly be near it, yeah. Well, I mean, and another point I want to make, there is a right-of-way for loading and
Yes.
unloading for those businesses.
Yes.
It does need to be kept clear.
Absolutely.
And, I think it's a little bit, I really don't think that the town should have ever given those spots as parking spaces, because it made it impossible to use it as a loading and unloading area for the businesses, because there were cars just jam-packed in there.
Is the
Or the
right,
right-of-way?
is the right-of-way in the agreement, the old agreement?
It's in the deed.
Is it in the deed?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
Could we get a copy of that? It's
Yeah, that's
important.
important. That's an important element, because I think I'd certainly love to see us do something more enticing to the head of the harbor, including some, Harbor Dogs has been
like
quite a
putting a food
little
truck there.
business down there. It's done, it's.
I'm not saying that, I'm not recommending, I'm just saying that that's an option.
But I think we should encourage that kind of thing.
But there are also, people are always asking for different amenities out at the public landing, and
There it is,
we've
right
just
there.
jam-packed so much stuff in the space that we have that,
The fundamental issue becomes, is this spaces of value to use by the town or not? And I believe they are. Now, how we use them is an issue we need to address, but in which we haven't. I totally agree with that. But I think that if you put them off for any time period or reinstate the parking area, I don't see the benefit to the town and taxpayers. I don't. And we're not being consistent as a board with our approach.
It's okay that we disagree.
No,
It's fine,
I
Bob.
get it. I totally agree with you that we can disagree. But I think we're just being consistent with the parking thing is how I feel.
and that gravel drive that, is part of the right-of-way, I don't think it's as wide as it is now. I think over time, because people were parking there, it's widened.
It's widened.
So the landscaped area, or the area that you could have some sort of amenity, like more picnic tables or bike racks or
Something.
kayak racks, whatever it is that you ultimately decide you want there, the point being, we just have more space for it.
Well, and we can do those things relatively quickly, especially racks and stuff like that. And it doesn't have to be permanent. But that area, in my opinion, long-term is a gold mine area for this town, being at the head of the
We need
harbor.
to redevelop the landing. This is
Yep.
So, I mean, I don't really see consistency as like the highest possible achievable goal of the board necessarily, because, you know, we're definitely going to change our mind about things, and, but, oh shoot, what was I gonna, I mean, this is eroding, like, really seriously. We also did, when there was the situation over here, there was a replanting plan. And it's part of this, just this area, I think everybody should walk down and look at like how heavily used it is, and just what can realistically be there. But, shoot, I had something I was gonna say that was more
But
substantive.
the area is very, very volatile.
Right, and the other thing, you can, there, if anybody's interested in seeing the back and forth between the town and the Olmsted brothers and Mrs. Bach about this whole area, we have all of these letters back and forth over years and years and years, and we talk about fulfilling Mrs. Bach's vision. Well, she paid to have, when there was a fire here in 1935, the whole thing just looked miserable. She paid, this was during the time she was doing Harbor Park too, paid for the cleanup of that and created all these plans with the Olmsted brothers. And the deal with the town was that she was going to pay for this cleanup, but we were going to slowly over time implement the plan from the Olmsted brothers. And it's a little embarrassing when you see all the back and forth from the town, because they kept saying, we just want more parking, more parking, more parking, and she was like, more trees, more trees, more trees. But we really do, I mean, this is basically to say this is part of a comprehensive long-term look, but in the short term, I mean, it might make sense when it was when the building owners were here, when the business owners were here, there wasn't like they understood that the town needed to look at this, that the situation had changed, and we were all a little bit uncomfortable with it. It made sense that Josephine needed to get rugs in and things like that. And we kind of said, we're not kicking you out tomorrow necessarily. It was like, because the agreement says it requires 90 days notice. So we were like putting them on notice that like, we are gonna need to look at this. And, I think they understood that. So then we didn't, if the timeline doesn't, I think we forgot to send out like the actual, the actual notice.
Yeah.
I don't think it was not, I think it's more important that we're saying, in the long term, this isn't, we don't see this as making sense to just give away free parking here anymore in return for landscaping. We don't necessarily need to tomorrow say like, we're towing any car that's there. I do think it can be a back and forth a little bit, but that the board should sort of tonight be saying, yeah, we're not ready to sign, like, re-up on that agreement from 1990.
Right.
I think this is a perfect opportunity to get more public input about what
We could.
should happen here.
Yeah, but in the interim, I think to your point, Allison, earlier, Stephanie and Tom, you haven't seen the old license agreement. I would suggest we do.
They're really detailed.
Is each of you to review that document, and Tom also, and the rest of us, and provide.
When we revoked
Yeah, I understand, but I want them to have the opportunity to review it. And if you would, just provide individually your comments to me, and I'll just kind of coalesce where we're heading in this direction. Same thing with Allison and Sophie and myself. Then we'll bring that summary to the table and decide where we go with it.
And Bob, in addition to that, if we could get if they still exist, the building permits for the decks. And then we can just see what the town approved. Yeah.
Just opened one, so it was actually 98, and
That's when they were like redone. They've been done.
A couple of times.
I saw references to this in 1945, and the Olmsted brothers were not pleased. So it's been like
Right, so why don't
over the years.
you give us the latest?
I think we've added significant value to those properties for private owners. I mean, like,
Yeah.
so if there's a rental space in those buildings that have a parking spot that comes with them, that's a significant more value than another rental space.
I think
So
that's
it's
why
almost
it's being requested.
Well, it
Yeah.
is to a point. It depends where there are other parking in the town that can be held from somebody. It doesn't have to be in your backyard. Or if it is, you're going to pay a premium for it. In other towns and cities, that is as much paid to the town as $200 or $250 a month.
Right. It just wasn't as valuable at the time. It's not like they did anything wrong. It made sense at the
But
time.
we
My point
can,
is,
but I
why aren't we
suggest that
having a
as
discussion
as a
of all of
process.
it instead of
Take a
just
look at the documents we already have, but we'll do it again, just to make sure. And just let me know your general feeling about direction. I'll coalesce it, and we'll bring it back to the table. It was a good discussion. I think it's not black and white.
Right.
Definitely not. And Audra, if you could provide us whatever permitting information you can find on those decks, it would be helpful, because I've never seen them, that's for sure. All right, with that, we'll move on to our manager's report. Ms. Manager.
All right, so I had a meeting with Jeremy Martin joined me with representatives from Coastal Mountain Land Trust to talk about the mountain biking trails on the Goose River Preserve.
Oh, yeah.
So one of the trailheads for that system of trails is actually on town-owned property, which is on Rollins Road. So they wanted to, ask for permission to have their equipment pass over that area so they could do maintenance on the.
Construction easement?
Not a construction easement, just permission for them to bring their equipment over those trails so they could get to the rest of it.
That's a construction easement.
It's not a construction easement.
What is it?
It's just permission for them to bring their equipment on a trail that we already allow for mountain biking for them to.
I understand, but everything on Route 1, when they wanted to use my property for just equipment, they needed a construction easement.
I didn't require them to have a construction easement. I just through email said, yep, you have permission. So.
Okay.
So anyway, they're doing a little bit of maintenance work on the trails in that preserve. And, at some point, they wanted to talk about some sort of formal agreement for the trailhead itself. And there's a number of different options. Some are more complicated than others. Some are quite simple, and the select board can approve them. So we've kind of laid out the constellation of options when it comes to that parcel and what they might want to do, so.
Oh, this is the parcel that in the past there's been discussion about maybe giving it to the Coastal Mountains Land Trust? Yes. That they, or which would be a town meeting thing?
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, it makes sense to have that conversation.
So right now, and I mountain bike a little bit, there's very limited parking on Rollins Road.
Correct. It's private.
And sometimes kids want to get on those trails, but they have to park at the Snow Bowl and then cycle down Barnestown, and Barnetown's
Yeah.
a little tricky. Traffic comes through there pretty fast.
Yeah.
So it is something to consider if we want to allow the land trust to have more access over there, to include a small parking lot, there's a lot.
And
there.
that's one of the things that they would like to do is.
Parking too.
Yeah, build a small parking area there.
Okay.
Among some other
Okay.
amenities.
To the river? Or,
It would be fairly close.
Next to the river. Gravel, I think, is what they propose.
Okay.
Yep. So anyway, they're kind of thinking about what might work best for them. So, at some point when I've had a chance to circle back with them and they've decided what they think would work best, we'll bring something forward to the board. We also talked about the site law permitting for the Snow Bowl, because, their completion of the Round the Mountain Trail is really tied to knowing what sort of permitting they need to do there. And it's been difficult and frustrating for them. They lost a construction season. We're not getting good guidance from DEP on what needs to be done. We're hoping that we get something back from them soon. I know Will Gartley is putting a lot of pressure on, the officer at DEP who does the site law permitting to try to figure out what they can do so that they can move forward with that project, because it would be a real shame to lose another season, another construction season, and, not have, the Round the Mountain Trailhead finished on the
An important part for that, Audra, isn't that correct, is the cooler trail? They want to improve the access on the cooler trail, and that
Yes, yeah.
is a memorandum of understanding with the town?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So that's really the simple part, because a lot of that is just sort of maintenance of trails that are, that exist on the Snow Bowl. There's a few key areas where they need to cross and make connections. And, we really just need to figure this out so they can move it forward. But we're really at the, the whim of DEP answering a lot of our questions.
Sure.
And, this is sort of tied to a lot of other plans that have, happened over the years for better utilizing the Snow Bowl for purposes outside of the ski season. So a lot of different entities are waiting for the Round the Mountain Trail to be built because they see that as sort of the backbone to a much more, elaborate system out there. So anyway, this is kind of like the one thing that's sort of held up moving forward with a lot of that, that other work that could be done out there, a lot of other planning that we'd like to implement. So it was a really good conversation. They're understandably, a bit frustrated by the position that they're in now, as are we. But, we're really trying to come to a solution and push things forward out there.
Do you have any idea, like just vague timeline for that standard site law permitting? Because I think that's the big holdup for them.
It is, yeah. We really don't, we can't even get somebody from DEP to come out there and meet with us to talk about, what we would need to do and what they can, because, a lot of the work on the Round the Mountain Trail actually does need to happen before we, start the site law process, because if it doesn't, it'll get caught up in it. But they need to figure out in this sort of interim period, do they need to do additional permitting through DEP? Before we start the site law process.
It's a big change, what they need to permit, the 20 acres, the little confusion about that, and then getting the standard site law. I think, pretty sure they need that standard site law all to be laid out before they can really do their own permitting.
Will doesn't think they do. He thinks that they'll probably need to start beforehand, but it's sort of a question of what do they need to do to get started with their project or get approval for their project as it is now.
Right.
And then it's the site law stuff and the additional work that everybody would like to do beyond just the Round the Mountain Trail work. So, yeah, I mean, we're still kind of waiting on all of that, but I will let everybody know when we get to that point, because that sort of wraps into that conversation that you were just having about, well, what's the master plan for the Snow Bowl? And that's all going to be wrapped up in the whole SLOTA process.
Thank you.
Do we need to, is this a question of not allocating enough resources to somebody that can oversee this, or?
No, this is, we're, tied up, we're victims of the DEP capacity staffing issues that they're having.
So
As the whole state is.
so Gartley and Dorsey is doing all the engineering, and is Gartley and Dorsey working for us or for Coastal Mountains Land Trust?
They're working for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess just two things. It would be great, I think.
Oh,
this
and
is-
first, just to make sure that we're clear about everything, we've only engaged Gartley and Dorsey to do the permitting.
Right.
There's a lot of, additional engineering work that,
Right.
yeah, we still need to figure that out.
Oh, okay. So, and how's that going to unfold? Do we need to put out an RFP and hire another engineer?
Well, because they're sort of coordinating the whole project, I think it'll, as we figure out what we actually need to do to
Decide how
submit
you
that application.
Decide how you execute.
Right.
I would agree.
It would be great, I think, just, it's been a little while since Ian has come and given just an overview of this is what Coastal Mountains Land Trust is doing. These are, this is the overall vision. Most of us sort of know the overall vision for the Round the Mountain Trail, but just an update to remind us, to hear what they're thinking.
I bet they would love to do that, because they've done some really great work on the
They
other
have.
side that I think they'd probably want to,
Okay.
tell us about. And
Okay, all right.
Are we, just to wrap that up, so, because the standard site law permitting is important on that, to get that whole process and the erosion control at the Snow Bowl, do we, or how, we have FEMA there for the triple access road and for the access to Pump Track Road. Are we waiting for them to complete their work before we hire an engineer?
Shouldn't have to.
So they need to come back with the estimate before we can move forward with fixing those two areas.
Okay.
So, and we're
any
waiting for
timeline
that.
on that, or just at their mercy?
I mean, this is something that we bug them about
coin and my
weekly,
coin.
so, yeah.
It's just not good. Anyway.
Kind of like everything is not working the way that it should on,
Did you think?
yeah.
That's why I guess having like the engineer who's overseeing it come and so that I feel a little bit like we're interrogating you and then you're trying to, remember what you've heard from these different entities that are in charge. It's, that's why sometimes I like hiring some kind of engineer or outside entity that can then answer to us about, this is what's going to happen, this is how, is it really that the DEP is just not answering emails?
No, it really
or-
is. I mean, we were,
Yeah.
we circled back with, Will about this, and we're like, have you heard anything? And he was saying he has a completely unrelated project that took DEP over I think it was 11 months just to send a confirmation email that they received his.
It's,
Okay, so this is a state funding issue.
well, it's not just funding. I think it's.
They are really understaffed there. That's
They
when
are.
I've talked to anybody.
They are.
Yeah, I think it's a staffing
What else is new?
issue. Okay, so I have more updates. So today, I was approached by Casey Leonard from Rockport Building Partners. He noticed the condition of the Curtis Island caretaker's house in general, and so he came in and he said, I've got expertise in historic preservation, and I'd really like to volunteer to help the town with Curtis Island, which I thought was just a wonderful offer, so I jumped right on it. And so Casey, his business partner, Tom Albertson, and Mike Scaling and I met to kind of talk about the report that Mike sort of shepherded through on the condition of all the buildings out there and, structural assessments and work that needs to be done.
Quite a while.
And so we talked about that, and we talked about how money had been allocated in the budget this year to painting the buildings.
Yep.
And so one of the first things that they said, and this is why I really appreciate them being involved, when they looked at when Casey went to look at the buildings, he immediately saw that there was asbestos in the basement and said, we shouldn't have even been down there. We're not going to do any more assessment work, and no one else should be doing any more assessment work until the asbestos is remediated. So I'm going to bring this forward to you once we have proposals. They're going to contact. There's really only 2 places that do it in the whole state of Maine, so we're going to get 2 quotes from these businesses if we can. We might only get 1 response or maybe none if we're unlucky to do the asbestos remediation. I think Casey also said some lead paint remediation as well. And that gives us, like a clean slate so that they can do further
build on that.
work.
Yep.
But I'm probably going to be recommending that the money that we allocated towards painting go towards that instead. And, then we can just work with them to, figure out a plan for what we want to do with the buildings out there. And
That's great.
Mike has also contacted the Conover family so they can send a representative we can, have this sort of little group that's, brainstorming what we need to do and come forward with a plan. So very grateful to Casey and Tom because that conversation we had about, needing to come back to all of you with a plan for Curtis Island, they've just made my life a lot easier. So very appreciative and.
Very nice.
Yes, so that's going great. And I think it's going to be much more comprehensive than just the buildings. It's going to be a conversation about how do we manage this going forward? Is having an on-site caretaker necessary? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And also, do we need to look at other avenues for, raising funds for there so it's not all borne by taxpayers? And, again and again, I forget the island now. There's an island where they did a major lighthouse restoration project, and Tom was saying that, it's probably a really good template that could be used for Camden. So So anyway, that'll come forward, you know, in this year, or, well, maybe not this calendar year, but this financial year. I sent an email about this, but Public Works fixed a board that was broken on the bottom of the gate of the Montgomery Dam. So there was a lot of leakage that happened over the past weekend because of that. It just got to a point where it was letting out a lot of water, but that resolved itself as soon as the board was replaced and it was fixed, and it was a pretty simple fix.
Did anybody keep track of the amount of time that took? Just, because that's been the kind of thing over the years, is that there's all this kind of stuff that happens, and it's like it happens internally, but from what I saw just briefly, it was like half the Public Works Department was out there, plus Dave Bolstridge, and so keeping track of what we've done there. I know you had created that document before of what had been done over the years. That might be a useful thing to share with the rest of the board. And then continue to update.
Yeah, and there were
maybe separate out the Montgomery Dam, like, in an obvious way from Seabright, and the other dams, so that we can be in a better position to answer questions about, how much is this costing us? How much time is it taking? What has been done and when?
Yeah, and another thing that should probably bring to everyone's attention, and this is a separate, unrelated, but kind of related. When the impoundment was drained and the bottoms of those buildings were visible, there are some that are in really, really critically poor condition. And I think that, there are some that had been in rough shape in the past, but I don't know what happened over the past year or whatever it was, but they looked even worse than the last time.
Yeah, I saw it. It didn't
Yeah,
look
so
good.
anyway, that's just something to keep in mind. Pictures were taken, information is going to be sent to the building owners. I think the worst one is a building owner who doesn't live locally, he lives out of state.
Right, okay.
We're going to be interviewing for the planner position next week, so we're hoping to hire somebody by the end of the month. And we received an unsolicited proposal for the tannery that Bob and I have talked about being brought forward at the next select board meeting if the proposer is ready to do so.
Okay. Thank you.
Woo,
Thank you
wow,
very much.
that was a
Yeah.
lot of-
There's a lot of stuff. Stephanie?
A lot. Well, I'm just going to reiterate what I brought up last time. I am still being asked by elderly folks if we can revise some of the parking down on the landing for the rest of the summer, so they can get down there before it gets dark, so they don't have to walk up and down that big hill and pay for parking, as they've lived here their whole life. They just are still feeling like we are piggybacking off of what they've already given to us, and it would go a long way to providing goodwill.
Okay. Sophie, anything else, Stephanie? No. Sophie.
So we had the first meeting of the River Citizens Advisory Committee meeting today. It was a kickoff meeting for an hour and a half with a great group of people, super engaged, super interested in the topic, already coming up with a lot of ideas. So I think it's going to be, really very propositional and bold and brave, and let's look at all the issues and really have productive conversations and think about how we can engage the public. And so there's a lot of good energy. And Forrest and Maggie have done a great job facilitating the meeting, and so we're going to have another 2 meetings, one in October and one in November.
Okay.
And we've already selected the dates, and these folks are very committed and showing up and participating. So that's it.
Thank you.
I don't think I have anything. We do have a Midcoast Solid Waste Board meeting coming up.
The 28th.
And so if anybody has Midcoast Solid Waste related questions, grievances, I think sometimes we don't end up bringing some of those issues or conversations back, but people really do care about the transfer station. The swap shop is going to be closing soon, which to me is always kind of a tragedy that we manage to keep we keep the trash thing going, we keep the recycling thing going all winter long, even though, 3 through 7 plastic recycling, how valuable is that really? But we're like, all reuse operations must cease because it's wintertime. And so I hear that a lot when I'm at the transfer station. Like, people are like, oh, why does it close? Why, it should be open more. And I think people don't know, who to say something to about that. It is, it's another place where your tax dollars are spent. We're trying all the time to fund it more with user fees, but it's still, Camden taxpayers are paying about a little over $200,000 to subsidize that operation. So people should feel comfortable saying, hey, I want my, my tax dollars to go to this and not this. And anyway.
So I think it would be, so I have a couple of things, if I may. Number one, the new bags are really good. Thank you so much. I know
Costing us more money, just so you know.
but they work really well, because I know it's an ongoing conversation we're
Fall
having.
apart and you can open them.
Yeah, you can open them. The second part is, I'm always confused about what is actually being recycled
Good question.
and compared to what is being landfilled, because I bring
I can answer
everything.
that really quickly.
Yeah, but I think
Okay.
it changes according to market.
To market.
It does not.
So they told me.
The
okay.
price that we get for the recycling changes. And so there are times when it's a cost to us and at times when it's a revenue generator. But we do not engage in widespread delusion of the public to make them feel like when you put something in, a lot of people think, oh, it all just goes in the landfill. There's one thing that goes in the landfill, and that's glass.
Correct.
And that's the glass that's not like a returnable. And so there is no glass recycling market. The transportation costs here are just way, and the contamination. There are different things that have happened in a few other places, like, little crushing it up and turning it into road base, things like that. We'd be really open to like a proposal from somebody, like, we want your glass to do, this or that with. But the one, the good thing about putting it in the landfill is that you're not shipping it around and, the cost of that. And then it's inert, so it's not polluting anything. And there are times when we can use it for like a beneficial purpose in the landfill for like a road or drainage or something like that. But everything
But
else
it's not
is recycled. Our most valuable things are like scrap metal, tin cans, number 2 plastic, especially number 2 natural. So, for the people that really can't handle doing everything, like a lot of older people can't, it's a lot. But if you're going to focus on a few things, focus on your metal items. Number 2 plastic. Number 3 through 7 is our lowest value. Mixed paper is low. Corrugated cardboard, and number 2 plastic. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Tom.
No, thank you.
Good. The only summary thing I wanted to mention was post office. Just as a summary overview, because honestly, there are a heck of a lot more questions than there are answers. Because even if you speak to certain people in the post office, they don't know the answers. But as of yesterday, all of the post office boxes for anybody, myself included, I go to Rockland to take out a separate box, where I have to go pick up my post office box mail. First of all, there's no validity to the rumor that the town had refused a trailer for use on Chestnut Street. That was fake news. But the reason for that is, and what's going on in the post office is they're working, the construction is in an area where sorting is done. And sorting is highly regulated by the U.S. Postal Service in terms of security, for obvious reasons. For many years, they had ports built into it, to design ports in the ceiling so an inspector could come in and look through portholes at people sorting mail. We had one here right behind the lobby, which has been torn down since, because they've now reverted to 100% video. But the reason is for people, there's checks in the mail, literally.
Right.
So that's why sorting can't be just done anywhere. They can't move it around. It can only be done postal. One of the reasons why, among 2 reasons why a lot of mail is being delivered late to homes is because, two reasons. One, there's a shortage of labor, certainly, but also the sorting is not as efficient because of the construction that's going on. So they had to move the post office box sorting thing out, and the only place that had 500 post office boxes available was Rockland. That's the reason why we couldn't go to Rockport, why we couldn't go to Lincolnville or anyplace else. And they just can't do it in a portable facility somewhere. Again, regulation doesn't allow that. However, that all said, the system is set up, it's operating, it's unfortunate because it takes me, it's like 10 miles to go from my house to Rockland. And for anybody who has difficulty getting around, it's going to be a hardship. It's going to last, I hear anything, some people say 2 months. Sorry, I don't believe that. I think it's going to be more like 3 or 4 months. But
Can people temporarily change?
Yes.
Like, can you go, can you
Yes.
say, how fast is the process if you want
A
to say,
number
I'm
of
not going to use my
people-
post office box, I want it delivered to my house?
That's
or-
correct, yes. A number of people have done that already, and they, I believe they'd have to go to Rockland now to have their mail diverted to their home address. That's your option as a resident. Since I know some number of people have done that, so there's no longer a need for 500 post office boxes at this point in time. But yes, that is an option. I just don't, I'm not a postal worker. I don't know if they can do that from Rockland, because this facility is closed to the public, period. So that's a question, but that's a good option to pursue that. If you can't get to Rockland on a regular basis to get your mail, perhaps you could apply for home delivery. And I think that's good. Again, the bottom line of all this is there's been a lot of miscommunication from individuals, including in the postal operations, who don't have answers. And literally, last Thursday, when this plan was supposed to did take effect yesterday for Rockland, the Rockland postal facility was just getting information on what they should do. And we do not have a postmaster at the moment in Camden. That person did resign. There is a postal operations manager that's regional. Call the number, asked Vicki there, she did too, no response.
Yeah. And it's not we have no control.
We have
over
no
the post
control
office.
whatsoever,
I
including
just
the.
want to kind of say that on the record, like, I'm not in charge of the post office.
We did not approve, we did see at one point in time the plans they had for the post office. We did see those. We did not, and we're not required, nor could we approve those plans. So their construction and what they're doing is federal business, and we have no clout whatsoever to make changes. I know, by the way, I would compliment Vicki Dudera, who has reached out to Angus King's office and Susan Collins' office to the frustration of how this has been handled. Would it do any good? I don't know. Anyway, that's
We would probably be open to putting it, if they did want to put a trailer there for, I think.
I don't, the problem is I don't think it would work. Yes,
before for a little bit?
if they came up with something that they thought would work, I believe, Audra, I can't speak for you, but you've already approved a trailer out there in May.
They did have it there for a while, apparently.
They had it for the month of May.
Yeah.
But all it was a front-end postal operation. If I went there with a card that I had a package, the person had to leave the van and go in the post office to get the package. Because everything has to be secure. There's a lot of complications to it. But if they had some mega module they could invent and bring here, we're listening, but I don't think it would happen. Anyway.
Thanks for that update.
Thanks for the update, yeah.
Anyhow, with that, I don't have anything else. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion that we adjourn the select board.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor? Thank you all. Great conversation, great discussion.